I was serving coffee when my daughter-in-law, Paula, dropped the bomb. With that smile that had always seemed too sweet, too perfect, she raised her glass and announced it to everyone at the table. "I have a wonderful surprise for my mother-in-law. Armando and I sold our apartment. We're moving into Mom's house tomorrow." My son, my Armando, was smiling by her side, like a proud little boy. The other guests clapped. Someone said what a lovely family we were. I calmly took my napkin, dabbed the corners of my mouth, and replied with a voice that came out steadier than I expected. "That's perfect, Paula. But you'll be sleeping on the street, because tomorrow at 8 in the morning, I'm handing the keys to this house to the new owners." The silence that followed was so thick, you could have cut it with a dessert fork. Paula dropped her glass. Armando turned pale. The guests stared at their plates as if the napkins had suddenly become the most interesting things in the world. No one dared to breathe, and I simply took another sip of my coffee and watched them fall apart. Because after 65 years in this world, after raising that son alone, after building this house with my own hands and the sweat of years of work, I had finally learned something. Silence can be the most powerful weapon when used at the exact right moment. But to understand how we got to that instant, to that scene that split my life in two, I have to go back. I have to tell you who I was before I became the woman who left her own family speechless. My name is Emilia Gonzalez. I am 65 years old, and for most of my life, I was invisible. I don't mean literally invisible. Of course, people saw me. They said hello on the street. Armando called me Mom. But no one really looked at me. No one asked what I felt, what I needed, what I dreamed of. I was simply Mom, the one who was there, the one who would always be there, like an old but reliable piece of furniture, like a shadow that moves when you move but never has its own light. I was widowed 12 years ago. My husband, Roberto, died of a massive heart attack on a random Tuesday while watering the plants in the yard. He fell among the hydrangeas he loved so much. By the time I found him, there was nothing to be done. I remember the first thing I thought, after the shock, was, now I am completely alone. Armando had already been married for 3 years. He was living his life. He had his job, his new wife, his plans, and I was left in this big house, with silence as my only companion and memories hanging on every wall like photographs no one looks at. The first few months were the hardest. I'd wake up expecting to hear Roberto's voice calling me from the kitchen. I'd set out 2 coffee cups and then remember. Just one. Always just one. Armando would come visit me on Sundays. Sometimes, when he didn't have other plans, he'd bring donuts from the bakery and stay for an hour. 2, if I was lucky, we talked about unimportant things. The weather, his job, the news. Never about what really mattered. Never about what hurt. It was in that emptiness that Paula appeared. Or rather, where I truly saw her for the first time. Because Paula had been there from the beginning, ever since she married my son. But I had only seen her as Armando's wife, the daughter-in-law, another person at family dinners, someone who smiled a lot and said little, polite, proper, perfect on the surface. But after Roberto's death, Paula started visiting more often. At first, I thought it was genuine kindness. She would come on Wednesday afternoons with Armando. They brought flowers. They asked how I was, if I needed anything. Paula offered to help me with the groceries, with the cleaning, with those things that suddenly seemed heavier now that I was alone. I was grateful. Of course, I was grateful. What mother doesn't feel blessed when her son and daughter-in-law show concern? When they seem to care? When the phone rings and it's their voice on the other end? When someone asks, "How are you, Mom? Really? How are you?" It took me months to realize that Paula's questions always led somewhere. They weren't open-ended questions, the kind that come from the heart. They were questions with a destination, with intent, like fishhooks covered in velvet. It started with small things, subtle, so subtle you almost don't notice until it's too late. A comment here, an observation there. Paula would look around the house with those big eyes and say, "Such a big house for just you, Suegra. Aren't you scared here at night? This neighborhood is changing so much." I read in the news the other day that 2 houses on this street were broken into, and I would nod. Yes, It's big. Yes, sometimes it's scary. But it's my house. The house Roberto and I bought 40 years ago. The house where we raised Armando. Where we celebrated Christmases and birthdays. Where I buried my dog. Where I painted the walls yellow when I turned 50 because I'd always wanted yellow walls and Roberto said it was too loud. This house has my footsteps etched into every floorboard. My dried tears on every pillow. My laughter still bouncing in the corners. It's not just a house. It's my life built of brick and mortar. But Paula didn't see it that way. To her, it was just property. An asset. Something with market value. And little by little, visit by visit, she began to plant that seed. The seed of doubt. The seed of fear. The seed of dependence. Armando started to change his tune, too. He no longer said, "How are you, Mom?" He said, "Are you okay here alone, Mom? Wouldn't it be better to find something smaller, easier to maintain, safer?" Paula and I were thinking you could sell this house and buy a nice condo downtown, close to us, so you're not so isolated. And every time he said it, Paula would nod with that smile. That damn smile that now, looking back, I recognize for what it always was. The smile of someone playing chess while you think you're playing cards. 6 months passed since Paula began her regular visits. 6 months in which my house stopped being my refuge and became the set of a play I didn't know I was starring in. The Wednesday visits became sacred. Paula would arrive on time, always with something in her hands. Sometimes flowers, sometimes bread, sometimes just that smile that was already starting to wear on me, though I wouldn't dare admit it. She would sit in the living room, in the same armchair that had been Roberto's, and begin her routine. First, she'd ask about my health, then about the house. Then she'd start with the stories, always stories about other people, neighbors, acquaintances, people I didn't know, but who apparently had lives full of tragedies that could serve as warnings for me. Mrs. Ramirez from the block behind us, she'd say, had to sell her house for almost nothing because she couldn't maintain it. Imagine, suegra, a whole life there, and she ended up in a nursing home because she had no other choice. If she had sold when she could still get a good price, she'd be comfortable now in a place more appropriate for her age. I listened. I nodded. I served more coffee. And inside, something told me these stories weren't accidental, that every word was measured, calculated. But I was good at ignoring my intuition. I had spent my whole life being good at ignoring the things I didn't want to see. Armando had changed, too. Or maybe he had always been this way, and I just hadn't wanted to see it. My son, my only son, the boy I nursed and raised and taught to walk, holding his hands in this very yard, now looked at me differently. He no longer looked at me like his mother. He looked at me like a problem that needed solving, like a responsibility that weighed him down. When he came alone, which was less and less frequent, he talked about money. "Mom," he'd say, "I've been thinking about your finances. This house must cost a fortune in maintenance. The yard, the heating bill in the winter, the roof that needs repairs. You could be using that money for yourself, to enjoy, to travel, to live better. Travel." That word was repeated a lot lately. Paula used it as bait. Imagine, suegra, if you sell this house, you could see Europe, or visit your sister in California. How long has it been since you saw her? 10 years, right? With the money from the sale, you could go whenever you wanted. And it sounded good. Of course it sounded good. Who wouldn't want to travel? Who wouldn't want to see their sister after 10 years? Who wouldn't want to be free from the weight of a big old house that sometimes, in the quiet nights, felt more like a prison than a home? But there was something they didn't understand. Or maybe they did understand, and simply didn't care. This house wasn't just walls and a roof. It was the only thing I had left of Roberto. It was the physical proof that my life had meant something, that I had built something solid, something real, something that couldn't just be erased because it was now inconvenient. The first time they mentioned concrete numbers was on a Sunday. Paula had prepared a special lunch. She invited her parents, too, Don Cesar and Doña Sonia Palacios. Nice people, always proper, always smiling. That day, Paula served lamb, my favorite dish. I should have known then. When someone makes you your favorite dish for no apparent reason, they want something from you. After dessert, when we were all relaxed and satisfied, Paula brought up the subject almost as if commenting on the weather. Suegra, Armando and I have been looking at condos. There's a beautiful one in the new building downtown, 2 bedrooms. Terrace with a view. 24-hour security. A gym. Event room. All-inclusive. And it costs only $250,000. I sipped my coffee. I smiled politely. "How nice," I said. "You'll love it. Save up, and you'll have it soon." Paula laughed. That laugh that sounded like bells but left a bitter echo. "Oh, suegra, we can't save $250,000. With Armando's salary and my income, we barely cover our current rent. But we were thinking, your house is worth at least $400,000. You could sell it, buy yourself something comfortable for $150,000, and use the rest to help Armando buy us that apartment. We'd all win. You'd have something more manageable, and we'd finally have an asset." The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Don Cesar cleared his throat. Doña Sonia focused on her cup. Armando stared at his plate as if it were the most fascinating thing in the universe. And Paula watched me with those expectant eyes. Waiting for me to say yes. Of course. That's what mothers are for. To sacrifice themselves one more time. But I said nothing. I just smiled and said I would think about it. That it was a big decision. That I needed time. Paula pursed her lips. Armando nodded quickly, too quickly, and changed the subject. But the poison was already injected. The idea was already planted. And they knew it. The following weeks were a systematic campaign. Paula came by more often. Now she brought brochures for condos, printouts from websites, photos of small, bright places overlooking parks. Look at this one, Sugra. It has a gorgeous open-plan kitchen. And this one has central heating. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing. Maintenance service included. It's like living in a hotel. Armando called every other day. "Mom, we saw another condo today. Perfect for you. On the first floor. No stairs. With a ramp for when you're older. Close to the grocery store. Close to the clinic. Close to us. You could walk to our house in 10 minutes. And I listened. I nodded. I said it sounded nice, that I'd consider it. But inside, something was changing. Something was waking up. A small voice that had been asleep for decades was beginning to whisper. A voice that said, "This isn't right. This isn't love. This is something else." But I wasn't ready to listen to it yet. I still wanted to believe my son loved me, that my daughter-in-law cared about me, that all of this was genuine, that I was the ungrateful one for doubting, the selfish one for clinging to a big house when they needed help, when they, young and with their whole lives ahead of them, deserved to have their own place. That's how manipulation works. It doesn't arrive shouting. It arrives whispering. It makes you doubt yourself. It makes you feel guilty for wanting to keep what's yours. It makes you believe that being generous means giving everything away, that being a good mother means disappearing so your children can shine. And I was about to fall into that trap. I was about to sign my own sentence. Because one Thursday afternoon, after another visit from Paula filled with brochures and dreams that weren't mine, I picked up the phone and called a real estate agent. I made an appointment for him to come appraise the house. I hung up the phone and sat in the empty living room. I looked at the yellow walls, the photos of Armando as a child, the vase Roberto gave me for our 20th anniversary. And for the first time in months, I cried. I cried because I knew I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life. But I still didn't know how to stop myself. The realtor arrived on a Tuesday morning. His name was Daniel Ruiz, and he carried a black leather briefcase that smelled new. He walked through my house with a notepad in his hand, writing things down, measuring spaces, taking pictures with his phone. I followed him in silence, feeling like a stranger in my own home, as if it no longer belonged to me. As if just by making that call, I had started an irreversible process. "The house is in excellent condition, Mrs. Gonzalez," he told me as he checked the living room windows. "Prime location, large yard, 3 bedrooms, 2 full baths. I estimate we can put it on the market for $420,000, maybe $450 if we do some cosmetic upgrades. Fresh paint, change the door handles, modernize the kitchen a bit, $420,000. It was more than Paula had mentioned, more than I had imagined. For a second, I let the number float in my mind. I could buy something small for $150,000 as Paula had suggested. I'd be left with almost $300,000. I could help Armando with his apartment. I'd still have money left for me. To travel, to live without worries for the years I had left. It sounded reasonable. It sounded logical. It sounded like the right decision. So why did I feel like I was betraying myself? Why was every cell in my body screaming no, that this was wrong? That once I signed those papers, there would be no going back. I told Daniel Ruiz I would think about it, that I would call him in a few days. He left me his card and departed with a professional smile. When I closed the door behind him, I leaned against the wood, my heart beating too fast. I had crossed a line. I had taken the first real step toward surrender. That night, Armando called, as if he had known, as if Paula had some special radar that detected my moments of weakness. "Mom, how are you? You've seemed off lately. Are you eating well? Are you sleeping okay? Paula is worried about you. She says you look tired." "I'm fine, Armando. Just thinking about things." "What things, Mom?" "About the house. About what you said. About the condos." There was a pause. I could hear his breathing on the other end of the line. Then his voice changed. It became more animated, more hopeful. "Really, Mom? You're considering it? That's wonderful. Paula is going to be so happy. We saw another incredible place. It has 3 bedrooms. One could be for when you visit. You could stay with us on weekends. It would be like having a close family again." A close family. Those words lodged somewhere deep. What was a close family? Was it me selling my house to finance my son's dreams? Was it me making myself smaller so they could have more space? Was it me disappearing little by little until I became the grandmother who visits on weekends if there's room and if she's not too much trouble? The following days were a blur of conversations and subtle pressure. Paula came by every day now. She no longer waited for Wednesdays. She'd show up in the morning with fresh bread. In the afternoon with excuses just to say hello. Always with something new to show me. Always with another reason why selling was the best option. "Look, suegra." She brought photos of a condo that she said was perfect, on the 5th floor. Small but cozy balcony, gym in the building, and the best part, it's on sale. $135,000. You'd save $15,000 from what we thought. You could keep that extra money for emergencies. And there was more. There was always more. Paula had calculated everything. The maintenance costs I would save. The lower property taxes of a condo versus a house. The security of living in a building with a doorman. The convenience of not having to worry about the yard, the roof, the old pipes. She had an answer for every one of my doubts. She had thought of every detail. It was as if she had been planning this for months. And she probably had. Probably from the moment Roberto died and I was left alone in this big house, Paula had seen an opportunity, an untapped asset, a widowed, vulnerable mother-in-law who could be convinced, molded, directed where she needed. Armando also ramped up his calls. They weren't every other day anymore. They were daily. Sometimes twice a day. "Mom, we found the perfect apartment for us. It has a study. Paula could work from home. I could have an office for my things. But we need to decide quickly. The owner has other offers. If we want to secure it, we need to make a down payment of $50,000 in 2 weeks. $50,000. In 2 weeks. The urgency had suddenly appeared, like a summer storm. It was no longer whenever you want, Mom. It was no longer think about it calmly. Now it was now. Now it was immediately. Now it was, if you don't do this, you're going to ruin this unique opportunity for your son. And I felt the weight of that responsibility crushing me. Because if I said no, if I refused, if I clung to my house and my life, then I would be the selfish one. I would be the bad mother. I would be the one who put her whims before the needs of her only son. Paula started bringing her mother, Doña Sonia. The 2 of them would sit in my living room and talk about how hard it is for young people today. The expensive rents. The impossibility of saving. How lucky children were who had parents that could help them. Doña Sonia would talk about how she had helped Paula and her siblings, how she had sold some land she owned to give them the down payment for their houses, and how happy it made her to see them established. It was a mirror in which I was supposed to see myself reflected. A good, sacrificed, happy mother. A mother who finds joy in renunciation, in erasing herself, in becoming a ladder for others to climb. But something in me resisted. Something stubborn and old and tired that said enough. That said, not again. That said, I've already given enough. I've already been enough. I've already sacrificed enough. My whole life being a wife, being a mother, being the one who holds things together, the one who gives in, the one who makes herself small. And now that I finally had something of my own, now that I finally had my space and my time and my house, now I had to give that up, too. One afternoon, Paula arrived with papers. She had researched the whole process. She had spoken to a lawyer friend. She had prepared a draft of an agreement. Look, suegra, it's very simple. You sell the house, we help you find your condo. And you lend us $250,000 for our apartment. We'll call it a loan, so everything is legal. We'll pay you back in 10 years. $25,000 a year. It's totally fair. We all win. Loan. That word sounded official. It sounded safe. But I wasn't stupid. I knew what lending money to family meant. It meant never seeing it again. It meant that every time I mentioned it, I'd be the stingy one. The one who collects. The one who doesn't understand that family is family, and money shouldn't matter between family. I looked at the papers Paula had spread across my table. I looked at her expectant face. I looked out the window at the yard, where Roberto had fallen among the hydrangeas. And for the first time in weeks, I felt clarity. I felt anger. I felt something inside me say no more. But I still didn't say anything. I still smiled and said I would review it calmly, that I needed time. Paula frowned. Time is running out, suegra. That apartment isn't going to wait for us forever. Then you'll have to find another one, I said, with more firmness than I intended. Paula looked at me as if I had slapped her. She left without saying goodbye, and I was left alone with the papers on the table and a new feeling growing in my chest. A feeling that felt dangerously like freedom. The days after my refusal were strange. Paula didn't come for almost a week. Armando didn't call either. It was as if they had decided to give me the silent treatment, as if my lack of immediate cooperation deserved to be punished with absence. And the funny thing is, instead of feeling guilty or worried, I felt relieved. The house was mine again. The silence was peaceful again, not lonely. I could drink my coffee in the morning without waiting for the doorbell to ring with another idea, another plan, another reason why I should change my life. But the relief was short-lived, because Paula hadn't given up. She had only changed her strategy. When she returned, she no longer came alone. She brought Armando, and they both had long, worried faces, as if they were carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. "Mom, we need to talk," Armando said, sitting on the sofa with that defeated posture that made him look like a child again. Paula sat next to him, taking his hand, looking at me with glassy eyes as if she were about to cry. "What's wrong?" I asked, though something in me already knew this was theater, that this was the next act in their carefully planned play. Paula took a breath. She let a single tear roll down her cheek before speaking. "Suegra, we didn't want to tell you this. We didn't want to worry you. But we're in a very difficult situation. The owner of the apartment where we live is selling. He gave us 3 months to vacate. 3 months, Amelia, and we can't find anything we can afford in our current budget. Everything is outrageously expensive. The rents have gone up 40% in the last year." Armando nodded, his head bowed. "It's true, Mom. We've been looking desperately. But everything in our price range is horrible. Dangerous neighborhoods. Old buildings. Apartments so small a bed barely fits. Paula cries every night, thinking we might have to go live with her parents. And you know how Don Cesar is. He's a good person, but very strict. Paula would be miserable living under his rules again. I looked at my son, my 38-year-old son who had gone to a good university, who had a stable job as an engineer, who earned a decent salary, and who was now sitting in my living room saying he couldn't find a place to live without my help. Something didn't add up, but they continued before I could process my thoughts. That's why we need that apartment we showed you so badly, Paula continued, wiping her tears. It's our only chance to have something of our own. To not be at the mercy of landlords who can kick us out whenever they want. To build equity. Armando is almost 40 years old. I'm 35. If we don't do it now, when? We're going to spend our whole lives renting. Our whole lives with nothing of our own. Our whole lives insecure. And the loan we asked you for, Armando added, we would pay it back religiously. $25,000 a year. I have a raise promised at work. Paula is going to start tutoring English. We'll tighten our belts, but we will pay you. You're my mother. I would never fail you. It was convincing. It was emotional. It was the kind of speech that would make any mother feel she had to do something. But I had had a week of silence, a week to think, a week to listen to that little voice that had been trying to get my attention for months. And what about your current expenses? I asked calmly. If you can barely afford rent, how are you going to pay the mortgage on a new apartment, plus the HOA fees, plus the utilities? A $250,000 apartment with a normal mortgage requires payments of at least $3,000 a month. Can you afford that? Paula and Armando looked at each other. There was an awkward silence. That's why we need the loan to be interest-free, Paula finally said. And if you could give us the first 2 years as a grace period to get settled, that would be perfect. That way we could get organized financially. Ah, there it was, the interest-free loan, with a 2-year grace period, which meant that for 2 years they wouldn't pay me anything. And afterward, if afterward ever came, they would pay me $25,000 a year for 10 years. But the math didn't add up. $250,000 divided by 10 years was $25,000 annually. But with a 2-year grace period, that would be 8 years of payments, which meant over $30,000 a year. But they had said 25. The numbers danced and changed to suit their needs. And if I can't? I asked. If I don't sell the house, what will you do? The temperature in the room changed. Paula's jaw tightened. Armando looked at me with a mixture of pain and reproach. Mom, this isn't just about money. It's about family. It's about supporting each other. Dad always said family comes first, that you sacrifice for your own. Using Roberto's words was a low blow. Armando knew it. Paula knew it. And I knew it. But Roberto had also told me other things. He had told me to take care of myself, to not let anyone make me feel small, that my happiness mattered too. But Armando didn't mention those words, only the ones that suited him. I'll think about it, I said finally. Give me time. We don't have much time, Paula replied, her tone no longer soft. The apartment is going to sell, and our lease ends in 3 months. We need an answer in 2 weeks, max. 2 weeks. The rush again. The pressure again. The fabricated urgency, so I would make an emotional decision instead of a rational one. They left soon after. Paula didn't even pretend to be nice anymore. Armando kissed my forehead, but it was a cold kiss. Mechanical, like someone fulfilling an obligation. I watched them leave from the window, and something inside me broke. Or maybe it pieced itself back together. It's hard to tell the difference sometimes. That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, thinking about everything. About the years I had worked to buy this house. Roberto and I working double shifts. Me cleaning other people's houses so we could make the down payment. Living on the bare minimum to pay the mortgage. 25 years of payments until it was finally ours. Completely ours. No one could take it from us. It was our reward for so much effort. Our legacy, my security. And now I was supposed to just hand it over. Turn it into cash to fund the dreams of my son and his wife. Shrink my life into a $130,000 condo so they could have their $250,000 apartment. The math was clear. I lost space, security, and equity. They gained everything. But there was something else bothering me. During their visits over the last few months, I had noticed things. Little details that didn't fit with their story of financial hardship. Paula always had new clothes. Armando had traded in his car last year for a newer model. They went out to dinner frequently, according to their social media posts, which I checked sometimes, though I was embarrassed to admit it. They had gone on vacation to the beach 3 months ago. Pictures from expensive restaurants, nice hotels, drinks with little umbrellas, and yet they couldn't save for an apartment. They couldn't afford a decent rent. They desperately needed my help, or they'd end up on the street. Something didn't add up. Something smelled wrong. And I was finally allowing myself to smell that rot instead of ignoring it. The next morning, I did something I had never done. I called my sister, Lorena, in California. We hadn't really talked in 2 years. Short calls at Christmas, birthday texts, but nothing substantial. I told her everything. Every detail, every bit of pressure, every manipulation disguised as family love. Lorena listened in silence. When I finished, she let out a long, deep sigh. "Amelia," she told me with that firmness she always had, "they are using you. What you're describing isn't love. It's exploitation. And if you sell that house, you will regret it for the rest of your life. That house is your security. It's your independence. Once you hand it over to them, you'll be at their mercy. And believe me, the mercy of people like that is not a good place to be." My sister Lorena's words echoed in my head for days. They are using you. Exploitation. At their mercy. They were harsh words. Words that hurt because they carried truth. But there was still a part of me that wanted to believe she was exaggerating, that I was being paranoid, that my son couldn't be that calculating, that this was just a misunderstanding, a difficult situation where we were all trying to do our best. That illusion shattered 2 days later when Paula showed up unannounced. It was 8 in the morning. I was still in my robe, drinking my first cup of coffee. She rang the doorbell insistently until I opened it. She walked in without waiting for an invitation, a folder under her arm and a determination in her eyes that made me instinctively step back. "Suegra, we need to talk." "Seriously," she said, dropping the folder on the kitchen table. "A week has passed. I need an answer. The owner of the apartment is pushing. There are 2 other couples interested. If we don't make the down payment this week, we lose it. Paula, it's 8 in the morning. You haven't even said good morning." She looked at me as if I had said something absurd. "I don't have time for formalities, Amelia. This is important. This is your son's future. Either you care or you don't. It's that simple." The use of my name instead of Sugra hit me. The pretense of affection was gone. The mask of the sweet, respectful daughter-in-law was gone. This was the real Paula. The Paula who had been hiding under the smiles and the pastries and the kind visits. She opened the folder. There were more papers. Forms. Contracts. All of it already filled out with my information. My name, my address, the details of my house. Only my signature was missing. She had prepared everything. She had assumed I would say yes, that I would eventually give in, that a good mother always gives in. "I already spoke to Daniel Ruiz," she continued, pointing to the documents. "He's ready to put the house on the market today if we sign these papers. I also found the perfect condo for you, $120,000. It's cheaper than we thought. You save another $15,000. That extra money you could give to us for furniture for the new apartment. We need to furnish 3 bedrooms from scratch. $120,000. They had lowered the price again, and now they wanted money for furniture too. The demand was growing. The piece of my life they wanted was getting bigger with every conversation. "Paula," I said, trying to stay calm, "I am not signing anything today. I need time. I need to think. I need to consult with my own lawyer." "Why do you need a lawyer?" "I already consulted with one. Everything is in order. Everything is legal. Just sign, and we can move forward. It's my house. It's my decision, and I will not be pressured." Paula slammed the folder shut. The sound echoed in the kitchen like a gunshot. She looked at me with a coldness that chilled my blood. "You know what your problem is, Amelia? You're selfish. You always have been. Armando tells me things. He tells me how, when he was a kid, you worked all the time, how you left him alone, how you never had time for him. And now that he can finally have something good in his life, something he really wants, you're putting him second again. You're choosing your things over him again." Every word was venom injected directly into my deepest guilts. The years I had worked double shifts to feed him. The afternoons I couldn't be at his soccer games because I was cleaning other people's houses. The times I came home so tired I could barely read him a story before bed. Everything I had done out of necessity, out of love, to give him a better future, was now being used as a weapon against me. "Get out of my house," I said, in a voice I didn't recognize as my own. "What did you say?" I said. "Get out of my house. Now." Paula looked at me with contempt. She picked up her folder. She walked to the door. But before leaving, she turned. "You're going to regret this," she said. "When you're old and sick and alone and you need help, you're going to remember this day. You're going to remember you had the chance to be part of the family, and you rejected it. Don't expect Armando to be there for you when you turn your back on us now." The door slammed shut with a bang that made the pictures on the wall tremble. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, shaking, the cold coffee in my hand. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt rage. Pure, clean, justified rage. That afternoon, Armando called. His voice was different, hard, controlled. "Mom, Paula told me what happened. How you treated her. How you threw her out of the house. I can't believe you were so cruel to her. She was just trying to help, to organize things to make it easier for you. Armando, your wife came into my house without permission at 8 in the morning. She pressured me to sign papers I hadn't even read. She insulted me when I refused. And you're calling to tell me I was cruel?" "She's stressed, Mom. We're stressed. Our situation is difficult. And you're not helping. You have this huge house you don't need. You have money you don't use. And you refuse to help your own son. Your only family. Your wife told me that when I'm old and sick, I shouldn't expect you to be there for me. Is that stress too, Armando? Or is it something else?" There was silence. A long silence that hurt more than any words. Because in that silence, I understood that my son was not going to defend me. He wasn't going to tell me Paula had crossed a line. He wasn't going to apologize. He had chosen a side. And it wasn't mine. "Mom, I have to go. I need to think. We both need to think about what we really want. If we want to be a family or if we want to be strangers." He hung up. My son hung up on me. I stood with the phone in my hand, listening to the dial tone until it turned into that high-pitched squeal that means the line is dead. A dead line. How appropriate. The following days, there were no calls, no visits. It was as if I had died to them. As if by refusing to hand over my life, I had lost the right to be a mother. The silence was deafening and painful and liberating all at the same time. But I didn't stay still. I called a lawyer, a real one, not Paula's friend, Alberto Lopez, a man in his 60s with an office downtown and an impeccable reputation. I told him everything, every detail, every bit of pressure. I showed him the papers Paula had left. Mr. Lopez reviewed them with a serious expression. "Mrs. Gonzalez," he said finally, "these documents are extremely favorable to your son and daughter-in-law. The loan they're proposing has no real collateral for you. There are no protection clauses if they default. There is no interest to compensate for inflation. And the way it's written, if something were to happen to you, the debt would simply disappear. They would not inherit the obligation to pay, so if I die, they get to keep everything and owe nothing." Exactly. Furthermore, I've seen cases like this. Family loans that are never repaid. Children who promise and then find excuses. One year, it's the bad economy. The next, it's a health problem. The next, they've had a baby and need the money for the child. And the mother never sees her money again. But she also can't pressure them because it's family. Because what will people say? Because a mother doesn't charge her children. I leaned back in the chair, feeling the weight of the truth. Everything I had sensed, everything Lorena had told me, was being confirmed by a professional. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't being selfish. I was being prudent. I was protecting the little I had left. "What do you recommend?" I asked. "That you don't sell?" he said without hesitation. "That you don't sign anything? That you keep your house? It is your security, your asset, your home. Once you lose it, It will be very difficult to regain that level of stability. And if you truly want to help your son, there are other ways, ways that don't leave you vulnerable. I left that office with a clarity I hadn't had in months. I knew what I had to do, but I still lacked the courage to do it. I still had hope that Armando would call, that he would apologize, that he would say, "Mom, I understand. I'm sorry. We went too far." But that call never came. 3 weeks passed without hearing anything from Armando or Paula. 3 weeks of silence that hurt like an open wound that wouldn't heal. I checked my phone constantly, hoping to see his name on the screen. Every time the doorbell rang, my heart leaped, thinking maybe they had come to apologize. But no, nothing. The punishment continued. And I was beginning to understand that this was the pattern. Pressure, rejection, silence, until he gave in. Until the pain of their absence was greater than my need to protect myself. But something had changed in me during those weeks. The conversation with Mr. Lopez had planted a seed, and that seed was growing. I had started to review my finances carefully, my savings, my expenses, the pension I received from Roberto, the income from the small retail space we rented out on the first floor of the house, something Roberto had built years ago, and that gave us a monthly income of $1,200. I ran the numbers, lots of numbers, and I discovered something interesting. If I sold the house for $420,000, as Daniel Ruiz had said, and bought a condo for $120,000, as Paula wanted, I'd be left with $300,000. Minus the $250,000 they wanted as a loan, I'd be left with $50,000, and a small condo. I would lose the retail space. I would lose that $1,200 a month of passive income. I would lose my yard, my space, my history. And what would I gain? The supposed peace of mind from knowing I had helped my son. The illusion that they would visit me more often. The fantasy that we would be a close family. But I had already seen how they treated me when I didn't do what they wanted. The silence, the emotional abandonment, the veiled threats. And that was now, when I still had something they wanted. What would it be like afterward, when I had nothing left to offer? It was then that I made a decision that terrified me and liberated me at the same time. If they were going to treat me like I didn't exist anyway, at least they would do it while I still had my house, my security, my dignity. I was not going to sell. I was not going to lend them money. I was not going to be part of this plan that only benefited me on paper but in reality left me vulnerable and impoverished. But I didn't tell them anything yet, because something else was growing in my mind. A plan of my own. An idea that had started as a small thought and was now expanding to fill every space in my consciousness. If they could plan in secret, so could I. If they could manipulate and pressure, I could protect and prepare. I called Mr. Lopez again. "I need to make some legal changes," I told him. "I want to make sure my house is protected, that no one can force me to sell, that if something happens to me, things are left the way I want them." Over the next 2 weeks, Mr. Lopez helped me get everything in order. We drafted a clear and specific will. The house would be placed in a trust. If I died, it would be sold and the money divided. A portion for Armando, yes, because despite everything, he was still my son. But another portion for my sister, Lorena, and another portion for a foundation supporting elderly women that Mr. Lopez recommended. Armando would inherit, but not everything. Not total control, not the grand prize for having ignored and manipulated me. I also updated the deed to the house. I made sure it was solely in my name, with no legal ambiguity. I checked that there was no way someone could lay claim to it or force a sale without my explicit consent. Mr. Lopez was thorough. Every detail mattered. Every clause was a protection. And then I did something else. Something I hadn't even considered before, but that now seemed not only reasonable but necessary. I put the house on the market. For real this time. But not to give the money to Armando and Paula. For me. For my future. For my freedom. Because while I was running those numbers, while reviewing my finances, I had discovered something else. My sister Lorena had been asking me to move to California for years. She lived in a small town near the coast. Warm climate all year. A community of retirees. Peace. She had sent me photos of a condo that was for sale near her house. 2 bedrooms, ocean view, $200,000. More expensive than the condos Paula was showing me, yes, but it was what I wanted, not what they needed me to want. If I sold the house for $420,000, bought the condo for $200,000, I'd be left with $220,000, more than enough to live comfortably for the rest of my days. To travel, to help Lorena if she needed it, to be generous when I wanted to be, not when I was forced to be, to live near someone who actually loved me, who called me, who asked how I was with no strings attached. The idea was terrifying, leaving the city where I had lived my entire life, leaving the house where I had, well, buried my husband's ashes in the garden, leaving the memories. But it was also liberating, starting over at 65. Why not? Who said life ended at this age? Who had decided I had to stay put, waiting for my son to visit when it was convenient for him? Daniel Ruiz came to appraise the house again. This time, I was sure. This time, it was my decision. Put it on the market, I told him. But I want total discretion. No for sale sign out front. I don't want anyone to know until it's sold. I understand perfectly, Mrs. Gonzalez. I have private buyers looking for exactly this type of property. We can handle everything with absolute confidentiality. The next few days were strange. I knew what was coming. I knew that eventually, Armando and Paula would be back. The silence wasn't sustainable. They needed something from me. And when people need something, they always come back. It was only a matter of time. That time came on a Thursday afternoon. Armando showed up at my door, alone, without Paula. He looked tired, worn out. He had dark circles under his eyes. He had lost weight. For a moment, my mother's heart softened. My boy, my son. He looked so vulnerably, so defeated. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking. "Can we talk? Please." I let him in. I made coffee. We sat in the living room as we had so many times before. But this time, there was a distance between us that hadn't existed before. An invisible but deep crack. "Mom, I'm sorry. I've been an idiot. Paula has been very insistent, and I let her pressure me. I let her pressure you. It wasn't right. I know that. But the thing is, we're desperate. We really are desperate. The owner of the apartment where we live raised our rent. $500 more a month. We can't afford it. And we can't find anything cheaper. The prices are impossible." I listened. I said nothing. I just listened. Because now I knew how to listen differently. I knew how to detect the manipulation even when it was wrapped in an apology. "I need your help, Mom. Not necessarily by selling the house. I get that that's a lot to ask. But maybe you could lend us something. $50,000. For the down payment on a smaller apartment. Something we can afford a mortgage on. We'll pay you back. I swear. With interest if you want. Whatever you say. We just need this push. This one last push to get ahead. 50,000. They had lowered the request. It was the new strategy. Ask for less to make it seem reasonable. To make me feel like they were being considerate, flexible. That they were compromising when, in reality, they still just wanted my money. Just in a smaller, seemingly digestible dose. "Armando," I said finally, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. In these last few months, how many times have you called me just to see how I am, without asking for anything, without wanting something, just to talk?" He was quiet, staring into his coffee cup, and in that silence was my answer. Armando couldn't answer my question. He kept staring at his coffee, as if the answers were floating in the dark liquid. Finally, he looked up, his eyes glassy. "Mom, I love you. I've always loved you. I've just been busy. Life is complicated. Work is overwhelming. Paula needs attention. It's not that I don't think about you, but you don't call," I said, with a calmness that surprised me. "You don't ask how I am. You don't come to visit just because. You only show up when you need something. And now you come with this story that you're desperate. But 3 months ago, you were on vacation at the beach. 2 months ago, Paula had a new designer handbag. Armando, I'm not stupid. I'm old, but I'm not stupid. That's different, Mom. Those are small things. We have to live a little, too. We can't just be miserable all the time, saving every penny. But an apartment is different. It's a big investment. It's something we need help to achieve. And why does it have to be my help? Why does it have to come from my assets? From my security? Your father and I bought this house alone. No one helped us. We worked for years. We sacrificed. Why can't you do the same? Because times are different. Armando exploded, standing up. Because now everything costs triple. Because salaries don't keep up. Because your generation had it easier, and you don't want to accept it. You all could buy houses on a single salary. We can barely pay rent with 2 salaries. It's not fair that you have so much and you don't want to share. There it was, the real reason. It wasn't help they wanted. It was redistribution. It was the idea that what was mine was also theirs. That my years of work, my sacrifices, my security, all of it should be available to them because life was hard. Because they deserved it. Because I was selfish if I didn't hand it over. Armando, I said, standing up too. Your father died leaving me this house and a small pension. This house is my security. It's what allows me to live peacefully. If I give you $50,000, if I give you any amount, I am risking my future. And for what? So you and Paula can have an apartment you probably won't be able to maintain, because your spending doesn't match your income. I've been watching. I've been paying attention. And what I see is that you don't have an income problem. You have a priorities problem. That's not true, he said, his jaw tight. You don't know anything about our finances. You don't know what we spend or don't spend. I know Paula gets a new phone every year. I know you eat out at least 3 times a week. I know you have premium cable. I know Paula goes to the salon every month. I know a lot of things, Armando, because I've been paying attention. And what I see is a lifestyle that doesn't match the desperation you're describing. Armando looked at me as if he didn't know me, as if the submissive, accommodating mother he had always known had been replaced by a stranger who dared to question, to point things out. To refuse? I can't believe you're being so cruel, he said, his voice trembling, so calculating, choosing your money over your own son. Dad would be so disappointed in you. That was the final blow, using Roberto against me. But this time, it didn't work. This time, I knew better. Your father, I said, my voice firm, taught me to value myself. He told me 1,000 times not to let anyone make me feel small, to take care of myself. He would be proud that I'm finally listening to that advice. Armando grabbed his jacket. He walked to the door. Before leaving, he turned. Fine, Mom. Keep your house, keep your money. But don't expect me to be available when you need me. Don't expect calls, don't expect visits. If you want to be alone, you're going to be alone. And he left. My son left, leaving that threat hanging in the air like toxic smoke. I closed the door behind him, and something inside me finally broke. I cried. I cried like I hadn't cried since Roberto's death. I cried for the son I had lost. Or maybe for the son I had never really had. For the illusion of family that had crumbled. For the loneliness that awaited me. But among the tears, there was something else. Relief. Clarity. Freedom. Because I didn't have to pretend anymore. I didn't have to pretend this relationship was healthy. I didn't have to carry the guilt of disappointing someone who only valued me for what I could give them. That night I called Lorena. I told her everything. Every detail of the conversation. Every hurtful word. Every veiled threat. Lorena listened in silence, and when I finished, she said something I will never forget. Amelia, sometimes losing someone who didn't value you is actually gaining yourself. Come to California. Start over. There are people here who truly love you. No conditions. No agendas. And in that moment, I made the final decision. I would call Daniel Ruiz tomorrow. I would fast-track the sale of the house. I would move to California. I would live my final years near someone who actually loved me, who called me just to hear my voice, who needed nothing from me except my presence. 2 weeks later, Daniel Ruiz called me, excited. I have an offer, Mrs. Gonzalez. A young couple, Professionals. They want the house to start their family. They're offering $430,000. Cash. A 30-day close. It's an excellent offer. I accepted immediately. I didn't think twice. We signed the agreement that same afternoon. The house was sold. My new life was beginning. And Armando knew nothing. Paula knew nothing. Because they didn't need to know. They were no longer part of my decisions. Lorena was ecstatic. She started looking into the condo she had shown me. It was still available. 2 bedrooms. Ocean view. A quiet community full of people our age. We did a video call with the realtor. I virtually toured every room. The wide balcony where I could drink coffee every morning looking at the ocean. The small but sufficient kitchen. The master bedroom with big, bright windows. It was perfect. It was mine. It was my choice. I made the offer. $200,000. They accepted. The closing was scheduled for 2 weeks after I closed on my current house. Everything was falling into place. As if the universe was finally on my side. As if all those decades of sacrifice were finally being rewarded with this chance to reinvent myself. But there was still one loose end. Armando and Paula still knew nothing. They still weren't speaking to me. The silence continued. And I knew they would have to find out eventually. I couldn't just disappear without saying anything. Although a part of me wanted to. I wanted to just leave and have them discover my absence by accident. To have them ring the doorbell one day and find strangers living in what had been my house. But that wasn't my style. It never had been. So I made a decision. I would tell them. But not in private. Not in a conversation where they could manipulate me or make me feel guilty. I would do it publicly. I would make it official. I would do it in a way that left no room for argument. I decided to host a dinner. A family dinner. I would invite Armando and Paula, Paula's parents, Don Cesar and Doña Sonia. A few close neighbors who had been witnesses to my life for decades. It would be my farewell. My announcement. My closure. I sent them the invitation via text message. Dinner at my house on Saturday at 7 o'clock in the evening. I have an important announcement to make. Please confirm if you will attend. It was brief, direct. No explanations. Armando replied after 2 hours. We'll be there. You're finally going to do the right thing, Mom. I read that message and smiled. He thought I had finally caved. That I had made them wait long enough and was now ready to announce I would sell the house and give them the money. That this dinner was my surrender. My white flag. He had no idea how wrong he was. He had no idea that the woman who had raised him, the submissive and accommodating mother, had died sometime in these last few months. And in her place, someone new had been born. Someone who had finally learned that loving herself wasn't selfishness. It was survival. Saturday arrived faster than I expected. I spent all morning preparing the dinner. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I needed to keep my hands busy. I needed to do something to stop me from overthinking what I was about to do. The faces I would see, the words they would say, the storm I was about to unleash. I prepared the lamb that Armando loved so much as a boy, mashed potatoes with butter, fresh salad, homemade bread, a tres leches cake for dessert, a full meal, a farewell dinner, though they didn't know it yet. I set the table with the white tablecloth I only used for special occasions. I took out the good china, the crystal glasses that had belonged to Roberto's mother. Everything had to be perfect, because this would be the last time this table would see a family gathering in this house. The guests started arriving at 7 o'clock on the dot. First, my neighbors arrived. Don Ramon and Doña Tatiana Morales, who lived 3 houses down. Then Doña Lucia Lopez, my next-door neighbor who had been my friend for 20 years. Good people, people who knew me for real, who had been there in good times and bad, without expecting anything in return. Armando and Paula arrived 15 minutes late. She was beaming. New dress, perfect makeup, brilliant smile. Armando looked different too, more relaxed, more confident. It was obvious they thought tonight was their victory, that they would finally receive what they had been waiting for, what they believed they deserved. Paula hugged me with fake enthusiasm. Suegra, what a joy to be here. The house smells delicious. We missed you so much these past weeks. Didn't we, Armando? Armando nodded, kissing my cheek. Yes, Mom, we missed you. And we're so excited about your announcement. We knew you'd eventually understand, that you'd see things from our perspective. I just smiled. I said nothing. I invited them in. To sit down. I served wine. We made small talk as everyone settled in. Don Cesar and Doña Sonia Palacios arrived last. Paula's parents brought flowers and a bottle of expensive wine. They sat next to their daughter with those satisfied smiles of parents who know their little girl is about to get what she wants. When everyone was seated, when the glasses were full and the plates served, I took my place at the head of the table, in the spot that had always been Roberto's. I looked at each person present: my son, my daughter-in-law, her parents, my neighbors, my friends. And I felt a strange peace, a calm that came from knowing I was doing the right thing for me. Well, I said, raising my glass slightly, thank you all for coming tonight. I know some of you are wondering why this dinner, why this gathering, so I won't make you wait any longer. I have an important announcement to make, something that will change things for all of us. Paula leaned forward, her eyes sparkled with anticipation. Armando watched me expectantly. Don Cesar nodded, as if giving me permission to continue. As if I needed his permission to speak in my own house. I've decided to sell this house, I said, my voice clear and firm. Paula let out a small, stifled squeal of joy. Armando smiled broadly. I knew it, Mom. I knew you'd understand. I knew you'd do the right thing for your family. I'm not finished, I said, raising my hand. Everyone fell silent. I've decided to sell this house. In fact, I've already sold it. The deal closed a week ago. The new owners take possession in 3 weeks. The silence that followed was absolute. Paula blinked, confused. Armando frowned. You already sold it? He asked. But we were going to help you with that. We were going to find buyers. Negotiate the best price. I already found the best price, I replied. $430,000. 10,000 more than the first appraiser estimated. I am very satisfied with the sale. Paula found her voice. Her tone was no longer sweet. 430,000. That's wonderful, suegra. So with that, you can buy your condo and still have more than enough left over to help us with ours. In fact, you could lend us 300,000 and you'd still have 130,000 for yourself. It's perfect. It's more than we expected. I took a sip of my wine. I let the silence stretch for another moment, savored their growing discomfort. I am not lending you anything, I said finally. Not 300,000, not 50,000, not a single dollar. Paula's expression changed completely. Shock, disbelief, rage beginning to form behind her eyes. What did you say? I said I am not lending you any money. In fact, I'm moving to California. I've already bought a condo there, near my sister Lorena. Ocean view, 2 bedrooms. $200,000. I'm moving in a month. Armando turned pale. Mom, this is a joke. Right? You're playing a joke on us. It's not a joke, Armando. It's my decision. My life. My money. And I've decided to use it on myself. On my happiness. On living near someone who actually loves me without conditions. Paula stood up so abruptly her chair fell backward. This is ridiculous. This is selfish. How can you do this to your own son? To your family? We spent months waiting. Months planning our future, counting on you. And now you just decide, no? That you're going to California to live your life as if you have no responsibilities here? My only responsibilities are to myself, I said, standing up as well. For months, you pressured me. You manipulated me. You made me feel guilty for wanting to keep my own house. You told me I was selfish for not wanting to fund your dreams. You threatened to abandon me if I didn't do what you wanted. And you know what I discovered? That I was already abandoned. That you only looked for me when you needed something. That to you I wasn't a mother. I was a bank account. That's not true, Armando shouted, standing up too. We love you. We just wanted your help. We wanted you to be part of our lives. Then why didn't you call me once in 3 weeks? Why didn't you come visit just to see how I was? Why was every conversation about money? About the house? About what I could give you? Tell me, Armando, when was the last time you asked me how I was feeling, what I was thinking, what I wanted? Not what you wanted me to want. What I truly wanted. Armando couldn't answer. He opened his mouth, closed it. He looked at Paula, searching for help. But Paula was furious. Too furious to be strategic. You know what, Amelia? We always knew you were selfish. Armando warned me. He told me his mother was like that she only thought of herself. But I didn't believe him. I thought I could make you see reason, that I could teach you what it means to be a family. But I see I was wrong. You are a bitter old woman who would rather have her money than her own blood. Paula. Doña Sonia intervened, clearly uncomfortable. Maybe this isn't the time. No, Mom, it is the time. Someone has to tell the truth. She made us waste months. Months we could have used looking for other options. She made us believe she would finally help us. And now she hits us with this. That she's going to California. That she's buying her Ocean View condo. While we're what? Still stuck in a rental we can't afford. Looking for apartments we can't buy. Because our mother-in-law decided her comfort is more important than our future. Your future is not my responsibility, I said calmly, though I was trembling inside. You are adults, professionals, with jobs, with incomes. If you can't buy a property, it's because your priorities are wrong. Because you spend on things you don't need. Because you want to live beyond your means. And you thought I was going to subsidize that lifestyle. But I won't. Doña Lucia, my neighbor, spoke for the first time. Amelia is right. I've seen how you two have treated her these past months. The constant visits. The pressure. Amelia told me everything. And I think she is making the best decision. A brave decision. Moving at this age isn't easy. But doing it to be near people who value her is admirable. No one asked for your opinion, Signora, Paula spat. You are in my house, I said, my voice like steel, and you will speak to my guests with respect, or you will leave right now. Paula looked at me with pure, undisguised hatred. Without the mask of the sweet daughter-in-law, this was her real face, and I was glad to finally be seeing it. To know I hadn't been crazy. That my intuition had been right all along. Let's go, Armando, Paula said, grabbing her purse. I'm not staying here to be insulted. Armando looked at me one last time. There was pain in his eyes. But there was something else, too. Resentment. Disappointment. And I knew I had lost my son. Or maybe I had never really had him. Armando and Paula left, slamming the door so hard it made the pictures on the wall tremble. Don Cesar and Doña Sonia stayed a few minutes longer, clearly ashamed of their daughter's behavior. We are so sorry, Amelia, Doña Sonia said sincerely. We didn't know things had gone this far. Paula told us a different version. She told us you had offered to help them, and then changed your mind. We didn't know about all the pressure they were putting on you. Don Cesar nodded. You are doing the right thing. A person your age deserves peace. Deserves to live without this tension. And if California offers you that, then go. Live. Be happy. We will talk to Paula, though I doubt she'll want to listen. They left soon after. My neighbors stayed a while longer. We drank more wine. We ate the dessert that no one had touched during the drama. And we talked. We talked about real things. About memories. About the life I had built in this house. About the good years and the hard ones. About Roberto. About how he would have supported this decision. When they finally left and I was alone in the quiet house, I didn't feel sadness. I felt relief. A deep, complete relief. I had taken the step. I had spoken my truth. And the sky hadn't fallen. The world hadn't ended. A chapter had just closed, so a new one could begin. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind, packing up 40 years of life into boxes, deciding what to take and what to leave, donating clothes, selling furniture, saying goodbye to neighbors, to the house, to the yard where Roberto had died among the hydrangeas. I cried while I packed, but they weren't tears of regret. They were tears of closure, of grieving for what I was leaving, but also of excitement for what was to come. Armando didn't call. he didn't come. The silence was total now. Final. And even though it hurt, it no longer surprised me. Paula had shown her true face that night, and Armando had chosen to be on her side. He had chosen resentment over love, disappointment over understanding. And I had to accept that. I had to let him go. Lorena called me every day. She sent me pictures of the condo, of the beach, of the small coastal town that would be my new home. She told me about the friends she already had waiting for me. A group of women our age who met on Thursdays to play cards, who went to the farmers' market together on Saturdays, who looked out for each other. That was family. That was what I had been looking for without knowing it. Moving day arrived on a sunny Tuesday. The new owners of the house came early. A young couple. He was a doctor. She was an architect. They were expecting their first baby. They showed me the ultrasound pictures with pride. We sat in the empty living room while we signed the final papers. I told them stories about the house, about the walls Roberto had painted, the garden we had cultivated together, the tree Armando had planted when he was 8. Take care of this house, I told them. It has a lot of love in its walls, a lot of history, a lot of life. And they promised they would, that they would raise their baby here, that they would build their own history in these rooms that had held mine for so many years. I handed them the keys and walked out for the last time. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I looked back, maybe I would regret it. Maybe the nostalgia would overcome me. So I looked forward, toward the moving truck that was waiting, toward the plane I would be catching in 3 hours, toward California, toward Lorena, toward my new life. The flight was smooth. I looked out the window, watching the clouds, thinking about everything that had happened, about how I had gotten here, a 65-year-old woman, leaving everything she had ever known to start over. It was terrifying. It was liberating. It was necessary. Lorena was waiting for me at the airport with a bouquet of flowers and a huge smile. We hugged like we hadn't hugged in years. I cried on her shoulder. She cried on mine. And in that hug was everything. Forgiveness for the years of distance. Gratitude for being here now. The promise not to let each other go again. The condo was even more beautiful in person. The balcony looked directly out over the ocean. I could hear the waves from the living room. The breeze brought in that salty smell that cleanses and renews. Lorena had decorated the guest room with pictures of us as children, of our parents, of the family we had been before life pulled us apart. That first night, I sat on the balcony with a glass of wine. The sun was setting over the ocean, painting the sky in oranges and pinks and purples, and for the first time in years, maybe decades, I felt at peace. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing. My phone rang, an unknown number. I hesitated to answer, but something made me do it. It was Don Cesar. "Amelia," he said, his voice tired. "I just wanted you to know that Paula and Armando had to move in with us. They couldn't pay the rent increase, and they are already causing problems. Paula complains about everything. Armando is bitter. They realize now that maybe you were right, that their priorities were wrong. But it's too late now. You're in California, and they are here, living with the consequences of their decisions." I thanked him for the call. I wished him luck, and I hung up. And I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel that joy of revenge. I just felt sadness for my son, for the choices he had made, for the life he could have had if he had chosen differently. But those were his lessons to learn, his path to walk. I couldn't save him anymore. It wasn't my job to save him. The following months were about adjusting, meeting Lorena's friends, joining the Thursday card game, walking on the beach every morning, learning to live again. Not as a mother, not as a widow, just as Amelia, as myself, with my own desires, my own decisions, my own life. Armando finally called 6 months later. His voice was different, more humble, smaller. "Mom," he said, "I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry for how I treated you. I'm sorry I prioritized money over you. I'm sorry I let Paula manipulate me. You were right. Our priorities were all wrong. Living with Paula's parents, it made me see that. It made me see a lot of things. I listened. I didn't interrupt. When he finished, I took a deep breath. Armando, I said, I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back. It doesn't mean things can be the way they were. You broke my trust. You broke our relationship. And that takes time to heal. If it ever does, I know, Mom. I understand. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. That I miss you. That maybe someday, if you want, we can try to rebuild something. Not what we had, but something new. Something more honest. Maybe, I said, someday. But right now, I need to keep focusing on me, on my healing, on my life here. And you need to focus on yours, on fixing your marriage, on learning to live within your means, on growing up. We hung up with vague promises to talk soon, but I knew soon might never come, and I was okay with that. I had learned that letting go wasn't abandonment. It was liberation. It was allowing everyone to live their own lives, make their own mistakes, find their own way. Now, sitting on my balcony looking at the ocean with Lorena by my side, I can say I made the right decision. I got my life back. I got my dignity back. I got my peace back. And even though the path was painful, even though I lost my son in the process, I gained something more valuable. I gained myself. To the women who read this story, who are living through similar situations, I say this: it is never too late to choose yourself. It is never too late to say no. It is never too late to protect what is yours. The guilt they make you feel for setting boundaries is manipulation disguised as love. Real love doesn't demand. It doesn't pressure. It doesn't threaten. Real love respects. It supports. It celebrates your decisions, even when it doesn't understand them. And if you have to let someone go to find your peace, even if that someone is your own blood, do it. Because at the end of the day, the person you have to live with forever is yourself. And you deserve to live in peace. You deserve to live without guilt. You deserve to live happily. I raise my glass to the setting Sunday, to this new life I built from the ashes of the old one. To the women who, like me, found the courage to say enough. I toast to us, to those who chose peace over guilt, dignity over compliance, freedom over obligation. I toast to those who finally said, I matter too. Get out of here, Mom. Far away. Julian's words echoed in my ears like a death sentence. He had just handed me a check for $15,000 after selling my $4 million ranch behind my back. My own son, the person I trusted most in this world, was kicking me out of my own home as if I were an intruder. But what he didn't know was that I had known about his plans for a week and had already taken steps that would leave him speechless. $15,000? I asked with a smile he mistook for resignation. Is that all I'm worth to you after 40 years of building this place? Julian shrugged with a coldness that pierced my heart. Mom, you're getting too old to manage a ranch this big. I sold the property for $4 million. I invested the money in a business that will double our profits, and this is your share so you can live comfortably somewhere else. He showed me some papers with a forged signature that was supposedly mine. What Julian didn't know was that Owen had come to see me the week before, crying and trembling with rage. Mom, I heard Julian on the phone with a lawyer. They're planning to forge your signature and sell the ranch. He said he already has a buyer and that you're too senile to notice. My younger son had risked his relationship with his brother to save me from this betrayal, and thanks to him, I had been able to prepare for this moment. For 40 years, I had built this ranch with my own 2 hands. I arrived here a young widow with 2 small children and $100 in my pocket. I worked 18-hour days. My hands became covered in calluses, my back bent under the weight of feed sacks. But I never gave up. Every tree I planted, every fence I built, every animal I raised carried my sweat and my blood. This land wasn't just property, it was my soul, materialized into $4 million of honest work. Julian was always different from Owen. From a young age, he would ask how much money we made, what the ranch was worth, when it would be his. While I woke up at dawn to milk the cows, he slept in late. While I negotiated with international buyers, he was out partying with the money I gave him. I paid for his college, his car, his wedding, his failed business ventures, always believing that one day he would appreciate my sacrifice. But the only thing he saw was an old woman standing between him and his inheritance. Mom, "You're 67 years old," he told me as he put the forged documents back in his briefcase. "It's time you stop being stubborn and accept that you can't keep living alone in such a big place. With $15,000, you can rent an apartment in the city and live peacefully for the rest of your life." His tone was condescending, as if he were talking to a spoiled child. "Besides, the buyer has already paid, and I've already invested the money. There's no turning back." I rose from my chair slowly, feeling every fiber of my being fill with a strength I hadn't felt in years. Julian thought he had defeated me, that he had taken everything I had fought for. But what he didn't know was that during that week, while he was celebrating his brilliant plan, I had been very busy with my lawyer, Claire, preparing the biggest surprise of his life. The same determination that had led me to build a $4 million empire would now serve to show him that no one, not even my own son, was going to humiliate me like that. "All right, Julian," I said with a calm that reassured him. "I accept your proposal, but before I go, I want us to have dinner together one last time. As a farewell." He smiled, believing he had finally broken my will. "Of course, Mom. I'll book a table at the fanciest restaurant in the city. You deserve it." What Julian didn't know was that this dinner would be the stage where his world would completely fall apart. The photograph of the ranch rested on the table, showing 4 decades of honest work. Soon, my son would discover that stealing from a woman who built an empire with her own hands was not as easy as he had thought. That night, I couldn't sleep. Julian's words echoed in my head like a painful refrain. "Get out of here, Mom, far away." I got up several times to walk through the house, touching each piece of furniture, each photograph, each object I had bought with my own effort. The ranch wasn't just my home, it was the physical testament to everything I had achieved against all odds. And now my own son wanted to erase me from history as if I had never existed. At dawn, I called Claire, my trusted lawyer. "Margaret, I need you to come to my office immediately," she said with urgency in her voice. "I have news about what you told me yesterday." I drove to the city with a racing heart, knowing my future depended on what Claire had discovered. During the drive, I remembered how I had met this extraordinary woman 3 years ago when Julian began pressuring me to put the ranch in his name. Claire was different from all the lawyers I had met. She didn't treat me like an ignorant old woman, but like a successful businesswoman who deserved respect. When I told her my suspicion about Julian's intentions, she didn't downplay my concerns. "Margaret, cases of financial abuse against seniors are on the rise, and sadly, many involve close family members," she had told me with complete frankness. "We need to protect your assets before it's too late." "Sit down, Margaret," Claire said when I arrived at her office. Her serious face confirmed the news wasn't good. "I investigated the documents Julian showed you yesterday. The signature is a forgery, obviously, but he has already filed those papers with the county records office. Officially, according to the system, the ranch is no longer yours." I felt the world collapse beneath my feet. "But," Claire continued with a smile that restored my hope, "what Julian doesn't know is that last week, when you came in alarmed by Owen's information, we already took preventive measures." Claire opened a thick folder full of official documents. "Remember when you signed those papers last Monday? You not only transferred the ranch to an irrevocable trust, but you also established very specific clauses. According to these documents, you are the sole lifetime beneficiary of the trust, and only you can make decisions about the property. Furthermore, any attempt at a fraudulent sale is automatically void." Tears of relief streamed down my cheeks as Claire continued explaining. "There's more," Claire said with satisfaction. "We also installed hidden security cameras in your house last week and recorded the entire conversation yesterday when Julian gave you the check. We have complete evidence of his criminal intentions." She showed me the recordings on her computer. Seeing my own son speak so coldly about robbing me broke my heart, but it also filled me with a steely determination. "And what about the money Julian claims to have invested?" I asked with concern. Claire smiled in a way I hadn't seen before. "That's Julian's problem, not yours. He sold something that didn't belong to him to a buyer who will soon discover he can't take possession of the property. When the buyer demands his $4 million back, Julian will have to explain where that money is." The poetic justice of the situation made me smile for the first time in days. I returned to the ranch feeling like a warrior prepared for battle. That afternoon, Julian called to confirm the farewell dinner. "Mom, I've booked a table at the Summit Grill for tomorrow at 8. It will be a very special dinner," he said with that false sweetness that now nauseated me. "Perfect, son. I have a surprise for you too," I replied with a smile he couldn't see over the phone. That night, I called Owen to tell him everything. "Mom, I can't believe what Julian is doing," he said, his voice breaking. "I knew he coveted the ranch, but I never thought he'd go this far." I explained the entire plan Claire and I had prepared. "I want you to come to the restaurant tomorrow, but don't say anything to Julian. I need you to be a witness to everything that's about to happen." Owen agreed immediately, a mix of nervousness and admiration in his voice. The morning of the dinner, I woke up early to get ready. I chose my most elegant red dress, the one I had bought when I turned 60, to celebrate 4 decades of successful work. I did my makeup with special care, styled my hair as if for a party, and put on the pearl earrings my late husband had given me on our 20th anniversary. If Julian wanted a farewell dinner, I would give him one he would never forget. As I dressed, I remembered all the times Julian had tried to convince me to sell the ranch. "Mom, you're not young enough for all this work anymore," he would constantly say. "You could live comfortably in the city with the money from the sale." What he never understood was that the ranch wasn't work for me. It was my identity, my purpose, my connection to life. Every dawn among my trees, every afternoon feeding my animals, every night listening to the sounds of the countryside reminded me that I had built something beautiful and lasting. At 6 o'clock in the evening, Claire arrived at my house with a briefcase full of documents. "Are you ready for this, Margaret?" she asked as we reviewed the plan one last time. "More than ready," I replied with a confidence I hadn't felt in weeks. "Julian thinks he's giving me a farewell dinner, but in reality, it's going to be his wake-up call." Claire laughed heartily. "I love working with you, Margaret. Not many women your age would have the courage to confront their own son this way." When I arrived at the Summit Grill, Julian was already waiting for me at an elegant table by the window. He was dressed in his best suit, as if celebrating a victory. "Mom, you look beautiful," he said as he helped me sit down. "I wanted this dinner to be special because I know it's going to be hard for you to adjust to your new life." The hypocrisy in his voice turned my stomach, but I maintained a serene smile. "Thank you for being so considerate, Julian," I said as I unfolded the napkin on my lap. "I also have something very special prepared for tonight." He smiled, believing I had finally accepted my defeat. What he didn't know was that in the next few minutes, his world would crumble like a house of cards, and the woman he had underestimated for so many years was about to show him what she was really made of. Julian ordered the most expensive bottle of wine on the menu, as if celebrating the greatest victory of his life. "Mom, I want to toast to your new chapter," he said, as the waiter poured the golden liquid into our glasses. "I know it will be hard to adjust at first, but you'll see that living in the city will be much better for you." His smile was so fake it made me want to scream the truth at him right then and there. But I held back. The show was just beginning. "Of course, son," I replied, raising my glass with a serenity that calmed him. "To new beginnings." Julian toasted with me, unaware he was celebrating his own destruction. As I drank, I watched every detail of his face, wondering when exactly I had lost the sweet boy he once was, replaced by this cold, calculating man before me. "Mom, there's something else I need to tell you," Julian began after several sips of wine. His tone turned more serious, more businesslike. "The buyer of the ranch wants to take possession next week. I need you to pack your personal things and be out by Friday." The coldness with which he spoke those words confirmed that to him, I was no longer his mother, but simply an obstacle to be removed. "So soon?" I asked, feigning surprise. "I thought I'd have more time to say goodbye to everything." Julian sighed impatiently, as if my feelings were a minor inconvenience. "Mom, don't make this harder than it already is. I've already found a perfect apartment for you downtown. It's furnished, has 24-hour security, and is close to the hospital in case you need medical attention." The way he talked about my future, as if I were an invalid old woman, filled me with an indignation I had to hide. As Julian continued to describe my new life, I saw Owen enter the restaurant out of the corner of my eye and sit discreetly at a table in the back. My younger son looked nervous but determined. We had agreed he would arrive half an hour after the dinner began to witness everything that was about to unfold. Seeing his worried face reminded me why I was doing this. I wasn't just defending my property. I was also protecting my good son from his brother's manipulations. Julian, there's something I don't understand, I said when he finished speaking. If the ranch was worth $4 million and you sold it for that price, where is the rest of the money? You only gave me $15,000. Julian took another sip of wine before answering, as if needing liquid courage for what he was about to say. Mom, I invested that money in a business that will give us much greater returns, he explained with the forced patience of someone speaking to a child. I bought shares in a tech company that's about to revolutionize the Latin American market. In 5 years, that $4 million will turn into $20 million. His enthusiasm was genuine, which made it all the more pathetic. My son had sold my entire life for a business dream that was probably as fake as his filial love. And what if that business doesn't work out? I asked with apparent innocence. What will happen to the money from the ranch? Julian laughed condescendingly. Mom, you don't understand investments. I studied business administration. I have connections in the financial world. I know what I'm doing. Trust me. The irony of him asking for my trust after stealing everything I had was so immense, I almost laughed out loud. The waiter brought our main courses, but I could barely eat. Every bite tasted of betrayal. Every sip of wine reminded me I was dining with the enemy. Julian, on the other hand, ate with appetite, as if it were a celebratory meal. Mom, I know this is hard for you, he said while cutting his steak, but think of all you're going to gain. You won't have to wake up at dawn to milk cows anymore. You won't have to worry about the harvests. You won't have to deal with problematic employees. You'll be able to rest, as you deserve. What Julian didn't understand was that I didn't want to rest. Those early mornings, those worries, those daily challenges were what gave my life meaning. The ranch wasn't a burden to be eliminated, but the engine that kept me alive, active, and with purpose. And what if I don't want to rest? I asked softly. What if I want to keep working my land until the last day of my life? Julian stopped eating and looked at me with a mix of frustration and pity. Mom, you're 67 years old. You're not at an age for that kind of physical labor anymore. You could get hurt, get sick, even die alone in that remote place. His concern sounded so false it made me want to throw up. Besides, the deal is done, the papers are signed, the money is invested. There's no going back. The papers are signed, I repeated slowly. What papers, Julian? He took the same documents from his briefcase that he had shown me the day before. These papers. Mom, here is your signature authorizing the sale of the ranch. He showed me the page where a signature appeared that was supposedly mine, but which I had never made. When did I sign this? I asked, my voice trembling. Julian looked me in the eye with a coldness that chilled my blood. Mom, you signed this a month ago when you came to visit me. Don't you remember? The lie was so blatant that for a moment I was speechless. My own son was accusing me of senility to justify his theft. You told me you no longer wanted the responsibility of managing the ranch, that you'd rather I take care of everything, he continued with complete naturalness. Julian, I said in a voice I barely recognized as my own, I never signed those papers. I never told you I wanted to sell the ranch. That is not my signature. His face hardened immediately. Mom, this is exactly what I was afraid of. You're starting to have memory problems. That's why you need to move to the city where you can get the medical attention you need. The manipulation was so brutal I felt a wave of nausea. Memory problems? I repeated in disbelief. Are you saying I'm senile? Julian sighed as if this were a conversation he'd had to have many times. Mom, it's not your fault. It's part of aging. But that's precisely why I made these decisions for you, to protect you from yourself. The cruelty of his words left me breathless. He hadn't just robbed me, he was now trying to convince me I was crazy. At that moment, I felt a gentle hand on my shoulder. It was Claire, my lawyer, who had arrived punctually according to our plan. Good evening, Margaret, she said with a warm smile. I hope you don't mind me joining you. Julian looked at me, confused. Who is this woman, Mom? His tone was no longer condescending, but genuinely worried. Control of the situation was beginning to slip from his grasp. Julian, I said with a smile that was finally genuine. I'd like you to meet Claire. She's my lawyer. She has something very interesting to tell you about those papers you just showed me. Julian's face turned pale as Claire took a seat beside us. The farewell dinner was about to become the confrontation my son had never imagined. Julian's face changed completely when Claire sat at our table. His arrogant confidence morphed into visible nervousness, like a child caught in the middle of some mischief. "Mom, what's going on here?" he asked, in a voice that tried to sound firm but trembled slightly. "Why did you bring your lawyer to a family dinner?" His eyes darted between Claire and me, trying to figure out what was happening. "Julian, allow me to introduce myself formally," Claire said with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Dr. Claire Ramirez, an attorney specializing in estate law and elder protection. Your mother hired me last week after her younger son alerted her to certain plans you had regarding her property." The way she pronounced the word plans made Julian turn even paler. "I don't know what you're talking about," Julian muttered, but his voice lacked the conviction he had shown minutes earlier. "Mom simply authorized me to sell the ranch because she can no longer manage it alone. Everything is perfectly legal." Claire opened her briefcase and took out a thick folder full of documents. "Legal? That's very interesting, Julian. Could you explain to me then why the signature on these documents doesn't match any of the authentic signatures your mother has made in the last 40 years? Julian took the papers Claire handed him, and I could see his hands shaking as he examined them. This must be a mistake," he stammered. "Mom signed these documents voluntarily. I was there when she did it." Claire pulled another document from her folder. "Are you referring to this occasion?" she asked, showing him a photograph I hadn't seen before. The image clearly showed Julian sitting alone in his office, signing the papers himself. Where did you get that photo?" Julian asked in a whisper. His face had lost all its color, and beads of sweat were starting to form on his forehead. "Julian, did you really think you could commit document fraud without leaving a trace?" Claire replied with a calm that brutally contrasted with my son's growing panic. "We have security cameras in the building where you have your office. We also have recordings of the phone calls where you discussed this plan with your accomplice." "What accomplice?" I asked, genuinely surprised. This information was new to me. Claire glanced at me briefly before continuing. "Javier Montenegro, the supposed buyer of the ranch, turns out to be Julian's partner in this scam. The plan was for Javier to buy the property at an inflated price. Then Julian would return the difference in cash, keeping the remaining $4 million for his investments." Julian clung to his wine glass as if it were a life raft in a storm. "That's not true," Julian murmured, but his denial sounded desperate. "Javier is a legitimate buyer. He wants the ranch to develop a tourist project." Claire smiled in a way that made me proud to have chosen her as my lawyer. "Julian, Javier Montenegro doesn't exist. It's a false identity you created using fraudulent documents. The bank account where he supposedly deposited the $4 million is in your name." The restaurant seemed to have faded away around us. Only the three of us existed at this table, and the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "Mom?" Julian said, turning to me with pleading eyes. "You know me. I would never hurt you. There must be a misunderstanding." For a moment, I saw the little boy who used to run to me when he had nightmares, and my maternal heart softened slightly. But then I remembered the $15,000 check and his order to get far away from here. "Julian, is what Claire says true?" I asked in a voice that sounded strangely calm, even to me. "Did you really forge my signature to steal the ranch from me?" My older son looked me directly in the eye, and for a second, I thought he would tell the truth. But instead, his face hardened, and the cold, calculating man I had known in recent years reappeared. "Mom, you don't understand what's happening," Julian said with renewed arrogance. "Yes, maybe I took some liberties with the documents, but it was all for your own good. You no longer have the mental capacity to make important financial decisions. Someone had to protect the family assets before you did something senile and crazy." The cruelty of his words hit me like a physical slap. Claire intervened before I could respond. "Julian, are you aware that you have just confessed to committing document fraud, financial abuse of a senior, and forgery of official documents? Because all of this is being recorded." She pointed to a small digital recorder she had discreetly placed on the table. Julian realized he had fallen into a perfectly orchestrated trap. Furthermore, Claire continued relentlessly. I want to inform you that the ranch could never have been legally sold because last week, your mother transferred it to an irrevocable trust. She is the sole lifetime beneficiary, and any subsequent sale is automatically void. Julian looked at me with an expression of absolute shock. "What does that mean?" he asked in a hoarse voice. "It means, my dear son," I said, finally finding my voice, "that not only can you not sell my ranch, but you now have a very big problem. The supposed buyer, Javier Montenegro, who according to Claire is you, has received a property that he legally cannot possess. Where are the $4 million you supposedly paid for it?" The realization of his situation hit Julian like a tsunami. I invested that money," Julian stammered. "It's in shares of a tech company. I can get it back." Claire shook her head. "Julian, we investigated that supposed investment. The company, Innovatech Americas, doesn't exist. It's another shell company you created to hide the money. Where is the $4 million, really?" Julian slumped in his chair like a deflated balloon. At that moment, Owen approached our table. "Sorry to interrupt," he said in a tense voice, "but I think Julian should know that the bank has already frozen all his accounts for suspicious activity." Julian looked up at his younger brother with an expression of utter defeat. "Owen, you're involved in this too?" His voice sounded like that of a man who has just discovered his whole world has fallen apart. "Involved in protecting our mother from your betrayal?" "Yes, Julian, I'm very involved," Owen replied with a firmness I had rarely seen in him. "I was the one who told Mom about your plans. I was the one who convinced her to call Claire. And I was the one who contacted the banking authorities when I discovered the fraudulent transfers." Julian looked at his brother as if seeing him for the first time. "Why?" Julian asked, his voice breaking. "Why did you betray me?" Owen sat next to him and put a hand on his shoulder. "Julian, I didn't betray you. You betrayed our family when you decided to steal everything Mom had worked for over 40 years. You betrayed your own mother when you treated her like she was a senile nuisance." Tears began to roll down Owen's cheeks. The waiter approached nervously to ask if everything was all right, clearly uncomfortable with the tension emanating from our table. "Everything is perfectly fine," I said with a smile that probably looked ferocious. "My family is just having a very necessary conversation about honesty and respect." The waiter quickly retreated, no doubt relieved not to be involved in our family drama. Julian looked up at me, his eyes full of tears. "Mom, I'm sorry. I know I made mistakes, but I did it all thinking about the family's future." Claire and I exchanged a look. After everything that had happened, my older son was still trying to manipulate me with excuses and justifications. The transformation of my sweet boy into this selfish, cruel man was complete, and there was no going back. Julian's tears didn't move me as he had hoped. For 40 years, I had learned to distinguish between genuine repentance and desperate manipulation. "Julian," I said, my voice firmer than I felt, "if you had really thought about the family's future, you would have spoken to me before making decisions about my life and my property." His sobs intensified, but I was no longer the mother who melted at her children's tears. "Mom, please," Julian begged, clinging to my hand. "I know I messed up, but we can fix all of this. I can return the money. I can cancel the investments. I can make everything go back to normal." His desperation was palpable, but it also revealed that he still didn't understand the magnitude of what he had done. "Julian, where exactly is the money you supposedly invested?" Claire asked with a patience I knew was purely professional. Julian wiped his eyes with his napkin and tried to recompose his businesslike posture. "The money is in an offshore investment account. It's a complex process, but I can access it in a few days." Claire pulled another folder from her briefcase. "Julian, are you referring to the account in the Cayman Islands that you opened last week under the name JM Holdings? Because that account is also being investigated for money laundering." Julian's face fell completely. "How is it possible you know all this?" Julian muttered, more to himself than to us. "Julian, when you decide to steal $4 million from your own mother, you automatically trigger multiple banking alert systems," Claire explained with a professional coolness that impressed me. "International transfers of that magnitude without legitimate business justification are always investigated by financial authorities." Owen took Julian's hand with genuine sadness. "Brother, how did we get to this point? When did you decide that money was more important than our mother?" Julian looked up at Owen with a mix of resentment and desperation. You don't understand, Owen. You were always the favorite son, the one who never had to worry about money. I'm the oldest. I should have inherited the ranch automatically. The favorite son? I repeated in disbelief. Julian, I treated you both exactly the same. I gave you the same opportunities, the same education, the same love. Julian let out a bitter laugh that sent a shiver down my spine. The same love, Mom? Owen always got to do what he wanted. He went off to study art, married whoever he wanted, never had to prove anything. I had to study business because you said someone had to understand business to help you with the ranch. The revelation hit me like a lightning bolt. For all these years, Julian had harbored a resentment I had never perceived. Julian, I never forced you to study business. You told me you wanted to do it because you were interested in business. Julian shook his head violently. I wanted to study music, Mom. I wanted to be a composer. But you needed someone who understood numbers and contracts, so I sacrificed my dreams for the family. The silence that followed his confession was deafening. Owen looked at me in surprise, clearly unaware of this version of the story. Claire watched everything with professional interest, probably accustomed to family conflicts revealing deep wounds during these types of confrontations. Julian, I finally said, if you felt forced to study something you didn't want, why did you never tell me? What for? Julian responded bitterly. The ranch was always your #1 priority. Your plants, your animals, your crops, we were secondary. Owen understood that and went to live his own life. I stayed, waiting for the moment you would finally acknowledge my sacrifice. His words hurt me more than I wanted to admit because there was some truth to them. Julian, it's true the ranch was very important to me, I admitted honestly. It was my way of securing a future for both of you. But that doesn't justify you stealing everything I worked for over 40 years. Julian covered his face with his hands. I didn't want to steal from you, Mom. I wanted you to finally see me as your partner, as your rightful heir. I wanted to prove that I could multiply the value of the ranch through smart investments. Claire intervened gently. Julian, do you understand there are legal ways to express those aspirations? You could have proposed a business plan to your mother. You could have asked to be included as a partner in the ranch's operation. You could have suggested investing part of the profits in other projects. Julian looked up with an expression that mixed desperation and frustration. I tried, Julian said, his voice breaking. For years, I proposed ideas to expand the business, to modernize operations, to diversify investments. But Mom always told me the ranch was fine as it was, that it didn't need changes. I realized Julian was right about this. I had been very conservative with my decisions, perhaps too resistant to change. But that didn't give you the right to make unilateral decisions about my property, I said firmly. If you wanted changes, you should have insisted more. You should have found ways to convince me, not to deceive me. Julian nodded slowly, as if he were finally understanding the gravity of his actions. I know, Mom, I know, and I hate myself for it. But when I saw the investment opportunity in Innovatech, I thought I could prove my worth without having to ask your permission. Julian, Owen intervened gently. Innovatech doesn't exist. Claire already explained that. What did you really invest the money in? Julian was silent for several minutes, clearly debating internally whether to tell the truth or continue lying. Finally, he sighed deeply. I invested it in cryptocurrency, he admitted in a barely audible voice. I thought I could triple the money in a few months and give Mom back her ranch, plus a spectacular profit. The confession landed on the table like a bomb. Cryptocurrency? I repeated in disbelief. Julian, you gambled $4 million of my money on cryptocurrency without my knowledge? Claire leaned forward with professional interest. Julian, could you be more specific? What kind of cryptocurrencies? Through what platform? Julian looked like a man who had just admitted to his own financial suicide. I invested in several new cryptocurrencies that promised extraordinary returns, Julian mumbled. Luna Coin, Galaxy Token, a few others whose names I can't remember. The investment advisor assured me they were unique opportunities. Claire and Owen exchanged a horrified look. Julian, Owen said, his voice trembling, those are classic crypto scams. How much money is left? Julian completely slumped in his chair. According to my last statement, there's about $300,000 left. The rest was lost when several of the coins collapsed last week. The silence that followed was absolute. 4 million reduced to 300,000 in a matter of days. The magnitude of the loss was so great that my brain refused to fully process it. 300,000, I repeated slowly. Julian, you lost $3,700,000 in 1 week? Julian nodded without looking up, like a child who has just broken the most valuable vase in the house. I thought it was a temporary market correction. The advisor told me all investments have initial volatility. Claire closed her eyes for a moment, probably calculating the legal implications of this revelation. Julian, do you have the documents for these investments? Contracts, receipts, communications with this supposed advisor? Claire asked, with an urgency she hadn't shown before. Julian rummaged through his briefcase and pulled out several wrinkled papers. Here are some documents, but most of the transactions were digital. Claire examined the papers quickly, her expression growing increasingly somber. Julian, these are not legitimate investment documents, Claire said after reviewing everything. These are forms from a cryptocurrency pyramid scheme. Not only did you lose your mother's money, but you were the victim of massive fraud. Julian looked up with a spark of hope. Does that mean I can get the money back? Claire shook her head sadly. It means the scammers have already disappeared with the money, and the chances of recovery are practically nil. The reality of the situation finally settled over all of us. Julian had not only betrayed my trust and stolen my property, but he had irreversibly lost a fortune that represented 4 decades of work. The poetic justice was brutal. The son who wanted to prove his financial superiority had fallen for the most basic scam in the digital world. The devastation on Julian's face was complete. He had not only lost his family's respect, but had financially destroyed what he so desperately wanted to possess. "Mom," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "What am I going to do now? I have no way to pay you back. My house is mortgaged, my credit cards are maxed out, and now the authorities have frozen my accounts." For the first time that night, I saw genuine vulnerability instead of calculated manipulation. "Julian, that is no longer my responsibility," I told him with a firmness that surprised even myself. "You made these decisions without consulting me, assuming you had a right over my life and my property. Now you have to face the consequences of your actions." Claire nodded in agreement as she organized the documents she had just examined. "Margaret is right, Julian. You are a 42-year-old adult. The decisions you made were yours, and so are the consequences." Owen took his brother's hand with genuine compassion. "Julian, I'll help you in any way I can, but first, you need to understand that what you did was terribly wrong." Julian squeezed Owen's hand as if it were his last lifeline. "Are you going to report me to the police, Mom?" he asked, terror in his eyes. The question hit me hard because, despite everything, he was still my son. Claire answered before I could. "Julian, technically, you've already been reported. The banks automatically reported the suspicious transactions to the financial authorities. Document fraud, forgery of signatures, and financial abuse of a senior are serious crimes that are prosecuted automatically." Julian turned as white as a sheet. "Does that mean I'm going to jail?" "It depends on many factors," Claire explained professionally. "Your cooperation with the investigation, your willingness to return what's left of the money, and your mother's decision on whether she wants to proceed with additional civil charges." All eyes turned to me. The most difficult decision of my life was in my hands. I could send my own son to prison or find another way to seek justice. "Julian, I want you to listen to me very clearly," I said after several minutes of tense silence. "What you did not only stole money from me, but it destroyed the trust I had placed in you for 42 years. You treated me as if I were a senile old woman who deserved neither respect nor consideration." Julian began to sob again, but this time it seemed genuine. "Mom, I am so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted to impress you." "Impress me by robbing me?" I asked in disbelief. "Impress me by treating me like a nuisance to be removed?" Julian shook his head desperately. "No, Mom. I wanted to impress you by multiplying the money, giving you back the ranch with improvements, proving that I could be the successful son you always wanted." His words revealed a deep distortion of reality that genuinely worried me. "Julian, I never wanted you to be different from who you were," I said sadly. "I just wanted you to be honest, hardworking, and to respect others. Financial success was never my priority for either of you." Owen nodded vigorously. "Mom always told us that the important thing was to be good people, not rich people." Julian looked at his brother as if he had just heard this for the first time. Claire cleared her throat gently to get our attention. "Margaret, we need to discuss the next legal steps. Julian will have to face the criminal charges regardless of what you decide, but you can influence the civil penalties." I took a moment to process all the information. My son had committed serious crimes, had lost a fortune, and now his future depended partly on my decisions. "Claire, what are my options?" I finally asked. "You can proceed with a full civil lawsuit seeking recovery of all damages plus additional penalties. Or you can negotiate a settlement that includes the return of the remaining $300,000 plus a payment plan for the rest, in exchange for not proceeding with some of the civil charges." Julian looked at me with desperate pleading in his eyes. "And if I choose the full lawsuit?" I asked. "Julian would lose everything he has, his house, his car, any remaining assets. Additionally, the penalties could include punitive damages that would keep him in debt for life." The severity of the options struck me. Part of me wanted Julian to pay completely for what he had done, but another part remembered the little boy he once was. "Mom, please," Julian begged, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I promise I will do everything I can to make it up to you. I will work day and night. I will sell everything I have. I will find ways to pay back every dollar I lost." His promises sounded sincere, but I had learned to distrust easy words. "Julian, how can I trust your promises after what you've done?" I asked him directly. "How do I know this isn't another manipulation to avoid the consequences of your actions?" Julian wiped his eyes and looked at me with a seriousness I hadn't seen in years. "Because I now understand that I lost the most important thing I had, your respect and your trust. Money can be recovered, but that, maybe never." Owen intervened gently. "Mom, can I suggest something?" I nodded, valuing his perspective. "What if we give Julian a chance to prove he's serious, but with very strict conditions?" Claire raised her eyebrows with professional interest. "What kind of conditions do you have in mind, Owen?" "Julian immediately returns the $300,000 that are left, sells his house and his car to generate more restitution funds, and agrees to work on the ranch without a salary until he is compensated for a significant part of the damage," Owen proposed. "Furthermore, all of this would be legally supervised with monthly reports to Claire on his financial progress." Julian nodded desperately at the proposal. "That's interesting," Claire said. "But we would need to add clear consequences if Julian fails to comply with the terms of the agreement. And we would also need guarantees that he won't be able to access any of Margaret's assets again without legal supervision." Julian seemed willing to accept any condition that would save him from complete ruin. "And what about the family relationship?" I asked, getting to the heart of the matter. "How do we rebuild the trust that you destroyed, Julian?" This question was more important to me than any financial consideration. Julian took several minutes before answering, clearly thinking deeply about his response. "Mom, I know I have no right to ask you for another chance," Julian finally said. "But if you allow me to work on the ranch not as your heir or your partner, but as your employee maybe over the next few years, I can prove that I am capable of respecting your work and your authority." His humility seemed genuine, but I knew that words were easy when someone was desperate. "Julian, the work on the ranch is hard," I warned him. "It means waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, working under the sun, getting your hands dirty, doing tasks you consider beneath your college education. Are you really willing to do that?" Julian nodded vigorously. "Mom, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I want to earn back your respect, even if it takes the rest of my life." Claire took notes as we spoke. "If we decide to proceed with a supervised agreement, we'll need to establish very specific terms: restitution amount, payment schedule, working conditions, consequences for non-compliance, and a clearly defined probationary period." Julian immediately agreed to all the legal requirements Claire mentioned. "There's one more condition," I finally said, feeling it was time to set the most important boundary. "Julian, If you accept this agreement, you can never again question my decisions about the ranch or pressure me to make changes I don't want. My property is mine, and my decisions are final." Julian nodded solemnly. "I understand completely, Mom. I will not cross those boundaries again." The restaurant had almost completely emptied while we were having this conversation that would change our lives forever. The waiter discreetly approached to ask if we needed anything else, clearly hoping we would finish soon. "Just a few more minutes," I told him kindly. The most important decisions of our lives could not be rushed for the convenience of a restaurant. I made a decision that would change our lives forever. "Julian, I am going to give you one chance to redeem yourself, but it will be on my terms, and with complete legal supervision," I announced with a firmness that resonated across the table. "You have exactly 1 year to prove you can be the son I raised, not the con man you became." Julian looked at me with a mixture of relief and terror, understanding this was likely his last chance. "Claire, prepare a contract that includes everything we've discussed," I continued. "Julian will immediately return the remaining $300,000, sell all his assets to generate additional restitution funds, and work on my ranch without a salary for 12 months. Claire nodded as she took detailed notes. "Furthermore, I want monthly reports on his progress, and if he violates any term of the agreement, we will immediately proceed with the full civil lawsuit." Julian wiped away his tears and looked me directly in the eye. "Mom, I accept all the terms. I promise you I will work harder than I have ever worked in my entire life." His voice trembled, but there was a determination in it I hadn't heard in years. "But I need you to understand something, Julian," I said sternly. "This is not a reconciliation. This is a supervised work opportunity. Trust will be earned day by day, and it could take years to rebuild what you destroyed in one night." Owen took his brother's hand, his own emotion palpable. "Julian, I'm proud of Mom for giving you this chance, and I hope you value it as it deserves." Julian nodded solemnly at his younger brother. "Owen, thank you for protecting Mom when I was betraying her. You're a better man than I am, and I hope to learn from you during this process." The genuine humility in Julian's voice gave me the first real hope that maybe, just maybe, we could heal this family wound. "Now let's talk about the specific conditions," Claire said, organizing her documents. "Julian, tomorrow morning, you need to transfer the remaining $300,000 to a restitution account that I will manage. Then you have 30 days to sell your house, your car, and any other valuable assets." Julian nodded without protest. "Where will I live during this period?" he asked, with genuine concern. "On the ranch with me," I replied, surprising him. "But not in the main house. There's a small cabin where the seasonal workers stay. You will live there under the same conditions as any employee on the ranch." Julian swallowed nervously. "With no special privileges for being your son?" I shook my head firmly. "No special privileges. In fact, with greater supervision for being the son who betrayed my trust." Claire continued laying out the legal terms. "Julian, you also need to understand that during this 1-year probation, you will not be able to make any significant financial decisions without supervision. No investments, no loans, no new bank accounts." Julian accepted every restriction without protest. "I understand. I need to prove I can handle basic responsibilities before being trusted with important decisions. There's something else," I added seriously. "Julian, during this year, you are going to learn every aspect of the ranch work. You will milk cows, you will plant pecans, you will repair fences, you will clean stables. You will physically understand what it means to build something with your own hands." Julian nodded vigorously. "Mom, I'm ready for that. I want to truly understand what you've done all these years." Owen smiled for the first time all night. "Julian, I think this work is going to change your perspective on a lot of things." Julian looked at his brother with curiosity. "What do you mean?" Owen reflected for a moment before answering. "When you work the land with your own hands, you understand that money isn't just numbers in a bank account. Every dollar represents sweat, effort, sacrifice. Maybe that will help you value what Mom built. You also need to understand," I continued, "that your relationship with me will fundamentally change. You are no longer my son who can ask for favors or expect special treatment. You are my employee who has to earn every opportunity he receives." Julian nodded solemnly. "I understand, Mom. I know I lost the right to be treated as your son when I betrayed you. I hope I can earn that place back over time." Claire closed her folder with satisfaction. "Margaret, I believe this agreement is fair yet firm. It gives Julian a chance to redeem himself while completely protecting your interests." I turned to Julian with the most serious expression I could muster. "Julian, I want you to understand that if you fail in this agreement, there will not be a third chance. I will proceed with the full lawsuit and cut off all relations with you permanently." "I understand completely, Mom," Julian responded, his voice broken but determined. "This is my last chance to be your son again, and I will not waste it." His words sounded sincere, but I knew that actions would be the only true indicator of his intentions. "Good. Then we start tomorrow. Be at the ranch at 5 o'clock in the morning, ready to work." The waiter approached again, clearly needing to close the restaurant. "Excuse me, but we need to close in 15 minutes, he informed us politely. Claire began to pack her documents. "Perfect. I think we've covered everything necessary for tonight. We'll meet at my office tomorrow to sign the official agreement documents." Julian nodded nervously, probably processing everything he had agreed to. As we stood up from the table, Owen hugged Julian with tears in his eyes. "Brother, I'm proud of you for accepting this opportunity. I know it's going to be hard, but I think it's exactly what you need." Julian returned the hug with intensity. "Owen, thank you for not giving up on me despite what I did. I need you to help me stay on the right path this year." "Julian," I finally said, "there's one more thing you need to understand. During these 12 months, you're not just going to work to compensate for the money you lost. You're going to work to rebuild the respect you destroyed, the trust you betrayed, and the family relationship you almost ruined forever." Julian looked at me with a humility I hadn't seen since he was a child. "Mom, I know I don't deserve this chance, but I promise I will do everything possible to be worthy of it." Claire walked us to the restaurant door. "Margaret, I'm impressed by your wisdom in handling this situation. You're giving Julian a chance to redeem himself, but with complete legal protections for yourself." I thanked Claire for all her professional help. "I couldn't have handled this without your legal expertise. I'll see you tomorrow for the official documents." When we stepped out into the cool night air, I felt as though I had just emerged from an epic battle. Julian's betrayal had been devastating, but at least now there was a path forward. "Julian," I said before we parted ways, "remember, tomorrow at 5 o'clock sharp, you'll be working like any other employee on the ranch. Don't be late." Julian nodded solemnly. "I won't fail you, Mom. This time, I won't fail you." Owen offered to drive me home, but I preferred to drive alone to process everything that had happened. On the way back to the ranch, I reflected on the most intense night of my life. My son had betrayed me in the cruelest way possible, but I had shown that a 67-year-old woman could defend herself and set firm boundaries. The future was uncertain, but at least now it was on my terms. When I arrived at the ranch and saw my lands bathed in the moonlight, I felt a deep satisfaction. This land was still mine. My 40 years of work were protected, and maybe, just maybe, I would have the chance to get my lost son back. But this time, it would be under my rules and on my terms. The woman who had built an empire with her own hands was not going to be defeated by anyone's betrayal, not even her own son's. 3 months after that night that changed our lives forever, I woke up, as always, at 4:30 in the morning. The alarm clock was no longer necessary. My body had developed an internal clock after 4 decades of early mornings on the ranch. As I dressed, I heard footsteps in the yard outside. Julian was already awake, preparing for another day of work that would start promptly at 5. The first few days had been brutal for him. His hands, accustomed to holding documents and calculators, were covered in blisters after the first week of physical labor. His back, which had never carried more than a briefcase, ached from lifting sacks of feed and heavy tools. But to my surprise, Julian never complained once. Every morning, he showed up on time, ready to learn and work. "Good morning, Mom," Julian greeted me when I stepped out of the main house. His appearance had changed drastically in these 3 months. His skin was tanned by the sun, his hands calloused, his muscles developed from physical labor. But more important than his external transformation was the change in his attitude. There was no arrogance in his voice anymore, only genuine respect and a humility he was learning day by day. "Good morning, Julian." I replied with the professional neutrality I had maintained these past months. It wasn't coldness, but the necessary distance between an employer and her employee. Today we're going to check the north sector of the pecan orchard. The trees need pruning and fertilization. Julian nodded and went to get the necessary tools without me having to tell him. He had learned the routine quickly. As we walked toward the orchard, I watched how Julian interacted with the trees. At first, he treated them like objects to be manipulated to complete a task, but gradually, he had begun to understand that each tree was a living being that required specific care and attention. "This tree looks sick," he commented, pointing to a pecan tree with yellowish leaves. His observation was correct. "What do you think might be causing that?" I asked, testing his learning. Julian moved closer to examine the tree. It could be too much water, a lack of nutrients, or maybe some kind of pest. His answer showed he had been paying attention during the lessons I had given him on plant care. "Very good. And what would you do to fix it?" Julian thought for a moment before answering. "First, I'd check the soil drainage to make sure there's no waterlogging. Then I'd examine the leaves for signs of pests or diseases. Finally, I'd adjust the fertilization based on what I find." I was impressed by the methodology of his response. He was learning to think like a farmer, not just follow orders. During these 3 months, Claire had religiously monitored Julian's progress. He had complied with all the conditions of the agreement. He transferred the remaining $300,000, sold his house and car, and turned over all the additional funds generated. The total recovered so far was about $550,000, a fraction of what was lost, but a significant start. "Mom, can I ask you a personal question?" Julian said as we pruned the pecan trees. It was the first time in 3 months he had dared to start a conversation that wasn't strictly about work. "You can ask," I replied, keeping my focus on the pruning. "Will you ever be able to forgive me for what I did?" The question hit me harder than I expected. I stopped and looked at him directly. "Julian, forgiveness isn't something that's given out like a prize for good behavior. It's something that's built day by day, decision by decision, action by action." Julian nodded solemnly, clearly understanding there were no easy answers. "You're proving that you can be reliable in daily tasks, but deep trust takes years to rebuild." "I understand," Julian replied sincerely. "I just wanted you to know that every day I work here, I understand better what I destroyed when I betrayed you. This land isn't just money or property. It's your life, your identity, your legacy." His words moved me because they reflected an understanding that had been absent for years. "I'm glad you finally understand that," I told him softly. That afternoon, Owen came to visit, as he did every weekend. The dynamic between the brothers had completely changed. Owen no longer had to protect me from Julian. Now he could relate to him as a brother who was genuinely trying to change. "How do you feel after 3 months of physical labor?" Owen asked Julian as we had dinner. "Tired but satisfied," Julian answered honestly. "It's strange, but there's something gratifying in seeing the physical result of your work at the end of the day." Owen smiled. "That's exactly what Mom always tried to teach us when we were kids." Julian nodded wistfully. "You're right. It's a shame it took me so long to understand." During dinner, Julian told me about his interactions with the other ranch hands. "At first, they looked at me with suspicion," he admitted. "They knew I was your son, and they probably knew something had happened. But gradually, when they saw I was willing to do the same work they did, they started to accept me. I was glad to know that Julian was earning respect through actions, not titles." "There's something I want to discuss with you," I told Julian after dinner. "Claire informed me that the legal process has progressed well. The authorities found some of the scammers who tricked you with the cryptocurrencies." Julian sat up with interest. "Does that mean we can recover more money?" I nodded cautiously. "Possibly, but it also means you will need to testify against them." Julian didn't hesitate for a second. "I'll do whatever it takes to help recover the money I lost because of my stupidity." His immediate willingness to cooperate showed me that he was truly committed to making things right. "Good. Claire will arrange the necessary meetings with the prosecutors." Julian nodded with determination. That night, after Owen left and Julian retired to his cabin, I sat on my porch to reflect on the last 3 months. Julian's transformation had been remarkable, but I knew that 3 months was just the beginning. Real changes, Deep changes in a person's character take years to solidify. However, for the first time since that devastating night at the restaurant, I felt something akin to hope. Julian was proving he could be disciplined, humble, and hardworking. More importantly, he was proving he could respect my authority and follow instructions without questioning or manipulating. These were the basic foundations upon which we might one day rebuild a family relationship. The next day was Sunday, traditionally a day of rest on the ranch, but Julian had developed the habit of using Sundays to study the technical aspects of agriculture. Books on cattle ranching, manuals on pecan cultivation, articles on modern irrigation techniques. Seeing my son voluntarily educating himself about my work filled me with a satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. "Julian," I said when I found him reading under a pecan tree, "I want to ask you a question." He looked up from his book attentively. "What are your plans for after this probationary year ends?" Julian closed the book and looked at me seriously. "Mom, if you'll let me, I would like to continue working on the ranch, not as your privileged son, but as an employee who has earned his place." His answer surprised me. "You don't miss your old life? Your office, your suits, your business meetings?" Julian shook his head firmly. "That life was built on empty ambitions and irresponsible decisions. This life, though simpler, feels more real, more honest." His words reflected a maturity I had never seen in him before. "Julian, there are still 9 months left in your probationary period," I reminded him. "A lot can change in that time." Julian nodded understandingly. "I know, Mom, but I want you to know that with each passing day, I'm more convinced that this is the right path for me." The sincerity in his voice made me feel that maybe, just maybe, I had gotten back the son I thought I had lost forever. That afternoon, as I watched Julian repair a fence under the evening sun, I felt a complex mix of emotions: pride for the transformation I was witnessing, caution for the wounds that were still healing, and hope for the future we might build together. Justice had been served, but more importantly, the possibility of redemption was manifesting itself day by day in my son's honest work. A year after that dinner that changed our lives forever, I woke in the early morning with a different feeling in my chest. Today marked the exact end of Julian's probationary period, and for the first time in 12 months, I felt genuinely optimistic about our family's future. The familiar sound of footsteps in the yard confirmed that Julian was already awake, preparing for another day of work that had completely transformed his character. During these 12 months, Julian had met every single condition of the agreement without a single fault. He had worked from dawn till dusk, had learned every aspect of the ranch's operation, and had shown a dedication I never thought he possessed. More importantly, he had recovered a total of $800,000 through the sales of his properties and cooperation with the authorities to pursue the scammers. "Good morning, Mom." Julian greeted me as I left the house. His physical transformation was remarkable, tanned by the sun, muscular from the work, with calloused hands that showed a year of honest labor. But his emotional transformation was even more impressive. The arrogance was completely gone, replaced by a genuine humility and a deep respect for the work and for me. "Good morning, Julian," I replied, but this time my voice had a warmth that had been absent for months. "Today is a special day." Julian nodded with a nervous smile. "Yes, Mom. My year of probation is up." I could see the anxiety in his eyes, wondering what decision I had made about his future. "I want you to know that you have surpassed all my expectations," I told him sincerely. During the morning, we worked together in the fields as we had done hundreds of times over the past year, but this time I watched every gesture of Julian's with new eyes. The gentle way he treated the animals, the meticulous care with which he pruned the trees, the patience with which he explained farming techniques to new workers. This was the man I had hoped he would become for 42 years. At noon, Claire arrived at the ranch for our scheduled meeting. Throughout the year, she had monitored Julian's progress monthly, and her reports had been consistently positive. "Margaret, in all my years as a lawyer specializing in family cases, I have rarely seen a transformation as complete as Julian's," she told me, as we reviewed the final documents. "Julian has met every term of the agreement," Claire continued. "He has returned $800,000 of the $4 million lost, has worked without a salary for 12 months, and has demonstrated a genuine change in his character and values. Julian sat with us, clearly nervous to hear my final decision about his future on the ranch and in our family. "Julian," I said, looking him directly in the eye, "a year ago, you betrayed me in the cruelest way possible. You stole my trust, forged my signature, and tried to take everything I had worked for over 4 decades." Julian looked down, clearly ashamed by the reminder of his past actions. "But during this year, you have shown that you are capable of changing. You have worked harder than any employee I've had in 40 years. You have learned to respect this land and to understand what it means to build something with your own hands. You have shown humility, dedication, and a genuine commitment to doing things right." The emotion in Julian's voice was visible as he listened to my words. "Therefore," I continued, "I have decided to offer you a permanent position on the ranch. Not as my automatic heir, but as my junior partner, with a fair salary and the opportunity to participate in operational decisions." Julian looked at me in disbelief, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Really, Mom? You trust me enough for that?" "Julian, complete trust will take years to rebuild," I explained honestly. "But you have shown that you deserve a chance to continue proving yourself. However, there are conditions." Claire pulled out a new contract we had prepared. "You will continue under legal supervision for the next 3 years, and any significant financial decision requires my explicit approval." Julian immediately accepted all the conditions without even reading them. "Mom, just the fact that you're letting me stay is more than I deserve." His tears of gratitude moved me deeply. "Julian, we all deserve second chances when we are willing to work for them." I extended my hand, and when he took it, I felt I was finally getting my son back. That afternoon, we called Owen to share the news. His joy was immediate and genuine. "Julian, I'm so proud of you. You've shown that you can change when you really commit to it." The 3 of us hugged for the first time in over a year, and for the first time since that terrible night, our family felt whole again. During dinner, Julian asked me a question I had been expecting. "Mom, will you ever be able to completely forgive me for what I did?" I reflected carefully before answering. "Julian, forgiveness isn't a single event, it's a process. Every day you prove that you've changed, every honest decision you make, every moment of respect you show me, contributes to that forgiveness." "I no longer feel the anger I felt a year ago," I continued. "I no longer feel the betrayal like an open wound. What I feel now is hope. Hope that you have truly found your way. Hope that we can build a new and better relationship on the foundation of mutual respect." Julian nodded with tears in his eyes, clearly moved by my words. That night, as I prepared for bed, I reflected on the most challenging year of my life. My son had betrayed me in the most brutal way possible, but he had also given me the opportunity to demonstrate my own strength. I had set firm boundaries, demanded respect, and created the conditions for a true reconciliation based on actions, not empty words. The next day, Julian would officially begin as my junior partner on the ranch. He would have a salary, real responsibilities, and the chance to genuinely contribute to the success of the operation he had tried to steal a year earlier. The poetic justice was perfect. The son who wanted to inherit the ranch without working for it would now have to earn it day by day with his honest effort. As I fell asleep, I listened to the familiar sounds of the ranch that had been my home for 4 decades. The crickets chirping, the wind in the trees, the distant murmur of the cattle. But there was a new sound that filled me with peace. Julian's footsteps in his cabin, preparing for another day of honest work. The woman who had built an empire with her own hands had shown that no one, not even her own son, could defeat her when she was determined to defend what she had built. But more importantly, she had shown that motherly love, combined with firm limits and clear consequences, could create the conditions for genuine redemption. Julian had lost $4 million of my money, but he had found something much more valuable. He had found his soul, his purpose, and his way back home. And I had recovered not only my assets, but the hope that my family could heal and grow stronger than before. Sometimes the most painful betrayals become the most powerful opportunities for growth, forgiveness, and genuine transformation. The ranch that had been the scene of the greatest betrayal of my life would now be the witness to the most beautiful redemption I could imagine. And for the first time in a year, I fell asleep with a smile on my face, knowing the future was full of new and hopeful possibilities.